as the working group. And we do plan to follow as an observer the process that's expected to be kicked off in the second half of this year for the press negotiations. Ultimately, it's up to the parties. So our engagement at this point is as an observer and to answer any questions that negotiating parties as well as we might have on this particular issue. Yes, I think you had a question on how we're working. There are any concrete outcomes of a collaboration platform as well as how the funds are working together. I think one element that we can say is there's also a task force that's looking into the results framework among different funds. And we did ensure that for the GEF, particularly on the LTC and CCF front, there is an alignment of indicators that we're utilizing to keep track of results and impacts that will be well aligned with what the GCF is actually looking into to capture as their elements. So I do think there is some progress in the area of making sure that the funds are looking into same kinds of outcomes and impacts, and eventually that should help developing countries as well as recipients in terms of trying to understand what exactly that they should be aiming for across different funds. And I think that's another good way to look into the complementarity of support.
Just to complement what Chiz just mentioned, there was actually a meeting yesterday on the climate finance delivery mechanism, and the funds had an update, and the working group, which is being chaired by the Green Climate Fund and together with the other four funds, they shared an updated update on their collaborative efforts. And these include the GCF, the GEF, the Adaptation Fund, and the CIFs. And in particular, the GEF and the GCF have provided an update on how we are progressing with the long-term vision implementation. The GCF, the Adaptation Fund, and the CIFs shared an update of their discussions to identify synergies in new programming areas. And the GCF announced the start of a consultation on the definition of their new programming strategy for the upcoming period, and for which the GEF has been invited to participate and to collaborate. Responding quickly to the Netherlands, Renee, we are aware of the UN Water Conference. We have not yet been involved with the organizers, but we are very happy to discuss with you in what ways we can be useful to this process and to cooperate for the water action agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo and Chizuru, for those responses. I see USA's flag, so you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. And I'm wanting a little bit of clarification. I think we're still a little bit confused about the answer with respect to the transparency reporting under the UNFCCC. I mean, our understanding, and I think Gustavo said this earlier too, is that that there's a $2 million ceiling now, and that that it could cost more than $1 million to do a single biennial one of the transparency reports. And so we're just trying to figure out if it would make sense to increase that ceiling so that you can bundle more than 2 reports and some additional work under the UNFCCC, so that, you know, this is a sort of an access issue. So that's what we're trying to figure out. And I think what I heard you say is that you think the ceiling is high enough, but I thought I heard Gustavo say something earlier different than that today. So I just want to clarify. So thank you.
Thank you, US. I give the floor to the Secretary to clarify that particular point.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Maybe I wasn't as clear. What I mentioned is that we're trying to expedite these enabling activities the best way we can and the fastest modality that we can use. And we have this expedited modality for enabling activities, but it hits a ceiling at $2 million. And then it becomes a full-size project, has to go through the same motions that we have with full-size projects coming to council, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we were asked to do in connection with the replenishment process is to try to streamline our project cycle, make it more, user-friendly and also more responsive to country demand. And the first, priority for us has been looking at enabling activities. So, I mean, if there is a, goodwill of the council, we can come back with a proposal that, for certain types of modalities, we can have enabling activities that could be directly approved by the CEO. And then, we would be with a much better position. We don't have to wait for months until we have a, council meeting to move them forward.
Should I?
So I give the floor to France.
Merci, Monsieur le Co-président. Je me permets de reposer la question parce que nous pensons que c'est important dans un souci de transparence avec le Conseil. On a bien compris qu'il y aurait un échange sur l'IBNJ dans les semaines à venir, mais nous souhaiterions que des éléments puissent être donnés au Conseil sur les prochaines étapes dans la possibilité que le FEM soit considéré comme pouvant avoir un rôle spécifique dans l'accord, si c'est possible de nous donner des éléments.
Over to you, Secretary.
Thank you for that question from France. Due to the power cut, we were unable to finish the informal briefing session as well as the presentation that the GEF Secretary had prepared on the potential way forward, being informed by the example we had from the Minamata Convention, becoming part of the one of the financial mechanisms supported by the GEF. So we will look into ways in which to have a briefing session on BBNJ with the engagement of the president of the conference, Ms. Rina Lee. And because the next session will be in, I think, the third and fourth week of August in New York, there is the timing issue that we will look into organizing this particular session as soon as feasible, so that the council members could be better informed about what's being put on the table by the BBNJ in the draft text, as well as what will be the way in which the GEF Council could also be then engaged in the iterative process that would need to unfold for the GEF to be recognized and have the role as or the part of the financial mechanism. So please rest assured that we will be following up with the council members on the next the briefing session with the on the BBNJ issue. So I think we also had that was the question also in the engagement with BBNJ with the Spain. So I hope that covered it. And I think Mexico had a very good point about the priorities as well as the CCC, and there's a need for us to be looking into adaptation elements, which we also consider to be very important. And for the GCF collaboration, one of the areas that we will be looking into having a major initiative will definitely be on adaptation elements. So wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chizuru. I see no more takers from the floor. I take it that we have successfully dispensed with the 2 sections of agenda item 16. So the remaining one will move to section C, which is to consider document GEF/6.62/12 titled Relations with Conventions and Other International Organizations. I am advised that this document will not be formally introduced, and that I can open the floor for any interventions, questions, or comments from the floor. Oh. Another way of asking the same question is, are you happy to approve the document GEF/6.62/12 Relations with Conventions and Other International Organizations? I see no disagreement, so it's approved. Can I bring your attention to agenda item 14? This is the report of the Ethics Committee. And the document is GEF/C.62/10. And I will now invite Ms. Yoshiko Motoyama, Chair of the Council's Ethics Committee, to present the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'm pleased to present the report of the Council Ethics Committee on behalf of the committee members, Laverne Quealy, Miguel Stutzen, Gerard Bussier, and myself. The objective of having this item on the agenda is to draw the attention of the Council to the existence and relevance of the policy, to the obligations the policy imposes on Council members, alternate members, and advisors, and to what we have learned from the experience of 5 years of application of this policy. The policy was approved by the Council in Decision 19/2017. The policy ensures that conflicts of interest are identified and managed in the context of the Council's accountability, of the desire to apply the highest ethical standards, of the need for public trust and confidence, and of the desire to protect the GEF's reputation and integrity. The policy establishes the Ethics Committee to provide oversight over policy implementation and help prevent and monitor situations that might affect GEF's reputation and integrity. The Ethics Committee adopted the GEF Declaration of Interest program to promote transparency of financial interests using GEF Declaration of Interest form. The ethics policy is a tool that shows the outside world that the GEF Council always acts in an ethical manner and has procedures to ensure it. In practice, every year, more than 100 covered individuals, example, GEF Council members, alternates, and advisors, file a declaration of interest form. Every form is reviewed, and so far, no immediate conflict of interest risks have been identified. In some cases, guidance has been provided to a few filters on their disclosures. So what have we learned over the last 5 years? One challenge has arisen due to the format of the Declaration of Interest, that despite its simplicity has made it difficult to handle by the filers. A second challenge is that 100% compliance with DOI requirement has been achieved very late, nearly 2 months after the deadline. And this has only been possible through persistent follow-up and reminders from the Council Secretary. A third challenge is that turnover in Council membership means covered individuals do not know the policy and are understandably reticent to comply without further explanations. That's why I think the Ethics Committee should present its report once a year, preferably during the first council of every calendar year. This will provide awareness and transparency for covered individuals and for the public in general. The Ethics Committee met after the last council to explore ways to improve the system and user experience. It has decided that one improvement can be to launch the annual DOI program in October with a compliance deadline period of 2 weeks. The DOI form itself will also be made more user-friendly. Further, the Ethics Committee intends to strengthen its reliance on the policy provision that enables it to present a draft decision by mail to the GEF Council, whereby individuals that have not filed the DOI will lose access to GEF Council meetings and to the related information and documents. To achieve this, the Ethics Committee proposes a draft decision before you that contains an amendment to the ethics policy, paragraph 4.4. Thank you.
Thank Yoshiko Motoyama for your presentation on behalf of the Council Ethics Committee, containing some recommendations and also some suggestions. I open the floor for questions and comments from the council members. Well, I see no takers, no volunteers. So, oh, yeah, Switzerland, please, Gabriella.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Yoshiko, for the presentation. We just have one question, so we can support the amendment in general, but how would you go about, because since all council documents are public on the website anyway, how would you endorse that paragraph added, or is it just for confidential documents? Because then we may have to add that, just say confidential documents. Because we were wondering, since everything can be accessed by anybody on the website anyway, excluding people from participating at the council meeting, okay, but not seeing information documents is difficult. Thank you.
Well, I'll redirect the answer to the question to the secretariat since it's an operational matter. Thanks. Costa, maybe Costa or William.
May I come in?
Yoshiko,
hello, my name is,
could you please repeat the question that you addressed to the secretariat? Thank you.
Is it?
Well, so the question was, you know, how there's the amendment in like point 4.4, and it speaks about that people who have not complied with the DOI will not have access to information documents. So I guess it's confidential information and documents because, and then we should probably add that confidential in there because all the documents and information for the
You're
GEF caps
correct.
are online.
Yeah.
So how would you endorse that?
Yeah,
It
you're
was just a
totally correct.
practical question of endorsement.
Yeah, thanks for your observation. Totally correct. Yes, we'll do that adjustment.
Well, yeah. So having seen no more takers for the floor, can I invite the council to adopt the draft decision included in document GEF/C.62/10? I see no objections. Japan, you have the floor.
Yeah. Just double checking on the issue with access to council document. This measure was recommended by the World Bank governance body, and maybe perhaps they envisioning a measure whereby perhaps the members before the council gets access to an, I don't know, an ID based portal to access what, I don't know. It is their proposal. So I would say before we fix that portion, we get back to the secretariat, to Costa and William to double check on how they were envisioning operationalizing this, if that's possible with Switzerland.
So you're posing the question to the secretariat to say they
Yes.
can formalize that?
Yeah.
So,
The answer will be yes.
well, that's the answer, yes. And I see nodding of heads. So with that, I've already make mention of the fact that we could consider the report and also adopt it, and I didn't see any objections. So I take it that the draft decision, including in document GEF/C.62/10 is fully adopted. Thank you. Well, the next agenda item is agenda item 9. This is on the work program and budget of the Independent Evaluation Office. And to introduce this document, which is document GEF/E/C.62/01, I invite Mr. Chua Wito to introduce it.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll take my timer out so that I don't go too long over here. So it's my great pleasure to present to you the latest from the IEO. In this session, we will actually cover items 9, 10, and 11. But we will start with the agenda item number 9 on the IEO work program and budget for fiscal year 23 that is about to start. As you well know, so we completed OPS 7 earlier in this fiscal year. The comprehensive evaluation contributed to the replenishment process, and we then presented to the Council last December. It is very heartening to note that with the addition agreed by the Council today regarding risk, all of OPS 7 recommendations have been adopted. Today, we'll bring you 2 evaluations that we started during OPS 7, but only completed after we closed OPS 7. Here on the slide, you can see our current work. Ongoing studies include insights and lessons from the management action record and impacts of COVID on GEF interventions and lessons thereof, as well as a strategic country cluster evaluation of GEF interventions in the Mekong region. These we will bring to the Council in December this year. Other work that has recently started includes a review of community-based approaches in the GEF, water security, another strategic country cluster evaluation of GEF work in drylands, and early warning systems in LDCF, SCCF projects. Some of you may recall that about 5 years ago, we conducted an evaluation of transformational change in the GEF using a purposive sample of GEF projects that were demonstrably transformational. This time around, we will have an evaluation that learns lessons from challenging projects. In all of our evaluations, we will be looking at transformational change, innovation, and additionality. These that I just mentioned above will be presented to the Council during the 2023 meetings. A few words about knowledge management and learning. We have stayed quite busy during this first half of this year, disseminating the findings from OPS 7 through our website, as well as presentations at a number of webinars organized with partners such as the World Bank's Independent Evaluation Group and the IFAD Office of Independent Evaluation. We also recently launched a book on transformational change for people and the planet, which was an outcome of the 3rd conference on evaluating environment and development that we organized in Prague in 2019. Many of our staff from IEO contributed to this volume, and I'm pleased to say also that the volume is open access and available for download free of charge from the publisher's website. We'll be happy to share that with you too. We organized and participated in a panel on climate change adaptation and measurement at the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association, and more recently, the biennial conference of the European Evaluation Society, where our office presented at several panels on transformational change, mainstreaming environmental sustainability into evaluations, on evaluating in fragile and conflict-affected situations, and on methodologies in environmental evaluation. We continue to offer training in evaluating environmental interventions, and we will be teaching a 2-day workshop at the International Program on Development Evaluation Training, or IPDET, next month. This is considered the premier development evaluation training program in the world. In addition, we are developing an online training course that will be available to all within the next few months. I continue to chair the UN Evaluation Group Working Group on integrating environmental and social impact into evaluations, and we partner with the new Global Evaluation Initiative launched by the World Bank and UNDP independent evaluation units. I dare say that all this reflects the fact that IEO remains at the forefront of the field of environmental evaluation. We continue to increase the availability of our work to everyone through enhancements to our website as well as through social media. We have made some significant improvements in this area and will have all terminal evaluations and the associated reviews available on our website for download in the near future. We also have already 177 thematic and other higher level evaluations available on the website. We are more active on social media platforms such as Twitter to alert stakeholders to recent evaluation findings and other advances. So on the budget, our budget request for fiscal 23 is $5.6 million. This will be the last year of GEF 7 for the IEO, and hence the evaluation budget is the lowest across the replenishment. This is the typical cycle in the IEO budget over replenishment periods, because following the completion of OPS 7, OPS in general, the budget goes down. The bulk of this budget is for fixed costs, reflecting our business model in which IEO staff develop and lead most evaluations. Our small office staffing remained at 17 during the year and is now coming to an end. But we will be recruiting 3 extended term consultants, ETCs, during the year, primarily for the expansion in analytical work and coverage of new integrated programs. For your information, actually, so we will be returning $150,000 from the operations budget to the trustee due to savings that were realized from the very little travel that we conducted in the past year. And this actually concludes my presentation of the IEO work program and budget, and I'm happy to respond to any questions. So thank you for your attention.
I thank Mr. Wito for his presentation and open the floor for any comments or questions from council members. Well, I see no one taking the floor. Thank you. So I invite the council to adopt the draft decision that is included in document GEF/E/C.62/01. It's so adopted.
Thank you very much. That was easy. I guess that we can move on and to the second part.
Yeah. I just want to say that the next agenda items, agenda item 10 and agenda item 11. Agenda item 10 is the evaluation of the GEF support to sustainable forest management. And item 11 is study on climate risk, adaptation and resilience in the GEF Trust Fund. And these 2 agenda items will be considered together. So I again invite Mr. Wito to speak on these 2 agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So we will indeed cover these items 10 and 11 together, and we'll also give you an update on our planned work during GEF 8. I will now hand this over to my Deputy and Chief Evaluation Officer, Geeta, who has overseen the preparation of the 2 evaluations that we bring to you today. The IEO task team leaders of these evaluations, Anupam Anand and Gabriel Sidman, are also somewhere here in the room. So Geeta, over to you.
Thank you, Juha, and good afternoon to everybody. The first evaluation I'll present is the evaluation of GEF support to sustainable forest management. So forests have been central to the GEF's work. GEF's support includes forest protection, restoration, management and sustainable use, as well as regional and global cooperation. The GEF's work on forests in many ways was a testing ground for integrated approaches to programming. SFM initiatives have been supported through the biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation focal areas, and increasingly through multifocal areas, as well as through the integrated approach pilots and impact programs. This evaluation is based on a portfolio of about 640 projects supported by GEF using the UNFF criteria for SFM. The total value of GEF investments covered to date is 3.65 billion. The results are based on 243 closed project evaluations. The Latin America and Caribbean region has the largest number of SFM projects as well as funding, followed by Africa. The World Bank, UNDP, and FAO account for the highest proportion of SFM funds. Moving on to results. 81% of SFM projects were rated in the satisfactory range, very comparable to the rest of the GEF portfolio. And about 57% of projects are likely to sustain their outcomes, again comparable to the rest of the GEF portfolio. At least 1.5 million hectares of forests have been restored with the help of the GEF, with approximately 1.6 million hectares restored in Africa. Approximately, where data is available, about 140,000 jobs have been created with GEF interventions. The 5 most common social and economic outcomes are increased income, community empowerment, gender equality, reduced conflict, and empowerment of IPCLs. Now turning to results along our major evaluation criteria, relevance. The GEF SFM portfolio is highly relevant with a focus on the major forest assets, the biomes, as well as the main threats, the drivers of deforestation. Relevance has been impacted in some cases where lengthy delays between project design and implementation have affected adjustments to changes in political and economic drivers of deforestation. Therefore, timeliness is really important in SFM projects. Coherence has been high, where GEF support has placed strong emphasis on government SFM capacity and where integration of MEA with local socioeconomic benefits has taken place. In terms of effectiveness, there has been improved forest protection and management, as well as increased income. Here, the challenge is reduction, where less attention has been given to political economy, understanding, local engagement, as well as rights insecurity, project design, and M&E have been weak. Efficiency in general, almost all project funding sizes have exhibited good value for money, and this is also based on our previous IEO work of looking at value for money in GEF SFM interventions. Forests can both fuel conflicts as well as provide opportunities for peace building and recovery. Several GEF projects have improved and employed conflict-sensitive approaches. For instance, several protected areas in Colombia have overlapped with conflict zones, and forest loss in and around these protected areas increased in the post-conflict period. However, GEF support is now strengthening protected area management and landscape activity, reducing deforestation, as well as promoting land restoration, while providing opportunities for peace building by strengthening governance and institutions, creating jobs, as well as supporting livelihoods. In terms of impact, GEF projects have contributed to strengthening institutional arrangements, created long-term capacity, fostered innovation, mobilized local knowledge and tradition. Half the evaluated projects created conditions for long-term sustainability through support to national institutions and policy frameworks enabling SFM. The challenges to sustainability have included the changing political, legal, and business environments that have shaped deforestation drivers, as well as where stakeholder empowerment was not given enough attention. In terms of equity, the GEF's guidelines for equity are robust, and when followed, distributional outcomes have been equitable, empowering marginalized groups. However, we noted in a few cases that GEF SFM projects have not been always able to address the marginalization of key IPLC forest stakeholders or take SFM-based small enterprises to scale. Here's an example of a community-based SFM approach used in Thailand in a watershed. Forest fire management activities were part of the broader objectives of sustainable forest and catchment management in a GEF project in Thailand. A geospatial analysis around the project indicates that some areas in the Northwest have seen recovery in about 2,800 hectares from earlier fire incidents, whereas fire severity was only found in about 110 hectares, mostly confined to the border areas. This success was primarily achieved through a community-based fire management approach. In terms of strategy, SFM activities have been diverse, evolved over time over the 30-year period, and been well developed, become more complex and ambitious in scale though. Practical-based and evidence-based SFM frameworks and guidance are needed to engage drivers of deforestation beyond the forest sector and for addressing more forest-related trade-offs as well as synergies. Good monitoring, evaluation, and learning at the project level positively influence SFM outcomes, with the impact programs representing the best response to date, since they offer regional platforms for lessons on SFM. There is a need for more consistent reporting on monitoring indicators, the key performance indicators, as well as on socioeconomic outcomes, and reporting on failures in addition to achievements with a view to facilitating further learning. So just summarizing on the main conclusions, the GEF is definitely well positioned as a natural and effective integrator of many goals related to forests. The MEA agreements, the sustainable development goals, the governance and transparency initiatives like the CBIT for forests. Second, a substantial and diverse portfolio, as well as extensive scope, calls for articulating a more comprehensive long-term vision and theory of change for SFM. The design has clearly improved with impact program-wide theories of change, but as we all know, the effectiveness is still to be established and evaluated. The next conclusion, addressing gaps in monitoring and evaluation will definitely enhance SFM-related learning and knowledge management. Managing trade-offs and maintaining benefits of SFM interventions for longer-term sustainability will enhance long-term sustainability. So with that, we came up with 3 recommendations. One is to develop a comprehensive strategy and clearly articulated, that's building already on what the GEF has done, to include a more comprehensive theory of change, some guidance on indicators, as well as results monitoring. The second recommendation is to strengthen monitoring of socioeconomic co-benefits and promote learning on SFM. We have been able to notice socioeconomic benefits measured in a number of interventions. It would be nice to do this on a more consistent basis, budget permitting, as well as not going overboard. And the third part is to support specific national and local priorities to strengthen capacity, improve enabling conditions such as working on forest right issues, address political economy issues, as well as manage trade-offs. So with that, I complete this evaluation. Should we go to the next?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So I'm very happy to present a study we did on resilience, climate change, adaptation, and climate risks. This was done primarily to understand this issue within the GEF context. It was not a comprehensive evaluation looking at the entire GEF portfolio. So resilience, climate change, and adaptation, climate risks can all refer to addressing the effect of climate change. However, the terms are not the same, as we all know, and have important differences, particularly when applied in the GEF context. Climate risks generally refer to risks to a project's achievement of outcome and sustainability. Climate change adaptation activities help a system address specific effects of a climate change through an intervention. And resilience, as mentioned this morning also by staff, is a broader term referring to help interconnected systems, both natural and human, respond to a broad set of disturbances, whether it's pandemics or economic shocks, violence, etc. As in the case of many development contexts, in the GEF, the term resilience is used in many different ways, from the narrow resilience of ecosystems to a specific shock to the broad resilience of the planet as a whole. So although climate change adaptation and resilience is not a key focus, the GEF Trust Fund has increasingly realized the importance of addressing climate change effects to achieve global environmental benefits. Although adaptation funding moved primarily to the LDCF and the SECF since GEF 4, multi-trust fund projects have integrated adaptation into GEF projects since GEF 5. The Resilient Food Systems IAP in GEF 6 integrated resilience to a whole new level and saw the piloting of the staff-created resilience, adaptation pathways, and transformational approach, RAPTA in abbreviation. In GEF 7, the updated safeguards policy mandated all GEF Trust Fund projects to perform climate risk screening during project design. So based on our findings, the GEF agencies were generally positive about the climate risk screening guidance from staff. Agencies with more experience in CRS appreciated the broad guidance, allowing them to continue to use their customized tools without incurring additional burdens. GEF SEC facilitated successful session in 2020, in which experienced agencies shared tools and lessons with agencies that had comparatively less experience in CRS. The timing of the CRS, with initial screening at the PIF stage and more in-depth screening at the CEO endorsement document stage, was found to be early enough to allow for appropriate integration into project design. However, some agencies were slightly confused as to how the quality of CRS was being assessed. Other agencies have found it difficult to find practical ways to apply the results of CRS to adjust project activities to respond to identified risks. When piloted in the Ethiopia RFS IAP, RAPTA was highly regarded, largely seen as successful, and leading to a more robustly designed and better implemented project with higher community ownership. However, project teams have not used RAPTA in the design of subsequent GEF projects because it does require special expertise, increased time, and funding. So there are always efficiency trade-offs. This demonstrated actually a trade-off between efficiency and robust integration of resilience into project design. I have to say this was a first ever done statistical analysis across any evaluation unit in the multilateral and UN world. So in a first ever analysis of this nature, statistical analysis of over 250 GEF projects showed that projects that integrated resilience into project design were more likely to have satisfactory outcomes rather than other projects. Furthermore, projects with a higher level of resilience integration were the most likely to have satisfactory outcomes. So stakeholders repeatedly pointed to GEF's unique position amongst the multilateral environment funds in resilience and climate change adaptation to integrate them into a broader range of environmental areas. This encourages capacity building and awareness raising of resilience and adaptation in areas that have not been traditionally considered climate change effects to a high degree, such as chemicals and waste. So finally, in closing, we had two main recommendations. We recognize that GEF's guidance on carrying out climate risk screening has been well received and has been very useful for most agencies. Further guidance on how to apply the results of screening to projects in different focal areas could help less experienced agencies in this sphere operationalize screening. In order to better understand the impacts of integrating resilience and adaptation on GEB achievement and sustainability, more specific monitoring of these themes is needed with attention to focal area context. In doing these evaluations, we'd like to thank GEFSEC, the agency's staff, council, civil society for active participation in our studies. Thank you. Over to you, Juha.
Thank you, Gita. Let me spend very short time mentioning the two information documents that we have also shared with you, because they are still rather important. The first one is the evaluation of enabling activities. And it's an information document because its conclusions and recommendations were principally incorporated into OPS 7, although the evaluation itself wasn't finalized to be presented at that point of time. We found that the original purpose of enabling activities has been fulfilled, but the needs are changing over time, and the focus of enabling activity supported projects is shifting. The enabling activities play an important role, as we have discussed, in the identification of needs, development of enabling environments for future projects, and the development of accurate data and baseline information. We found that the approval process is considered to be efficient, but there are some concerns post-approval regarding disbursement and implementation. The burden on GEF agencies is often high, so the processing and management of enabling activities is perceived to be perhaps not agile enough. Addressing the inefficiencies in the processes would help to strengthen the instrument. So the evaluation had 3 suggestions for improvement, which you can see here, and these have been already communicated in the OPS 7 context, so I will not delve into the details at this point of time. The Council has had a lot of discussions about the integrated programs, of course, and the need to ensure that the whole is larger than the sum of the parts. It is also very important that we are able to measure and demonstrate this. Therefore, the IEO has completed new guidelines for evaluating the programs. These guidelines are intended to inform both the work of the agencies as well as our own work at the IEO as we embark on evaluating the programs. A program evaluation is expected to provide a comprehensive and systematic account of a program's performance, including aspects related to its design, implementation, achievement of objectives and targets, and factors that affect performance. So here you can see on this slide the dimensions of evaluation coverage that are detailed in the guidelines, and these guidelines are thus the other information document for you. Then finally, a very brief introduction to our tentative work program and budget for the GEF 8 period. We will bring this to you for your approval in a finalized manner next year in June 2023. We had maybe it's not very easy to read actually, but it is in our document also. We had a work planning retreat where we took a detailed look at the GEF 8 programming directions and came up with the contours of a work program that we hope would add up to the 8th comprehensive evaluation that we'll need to produce by 2025. We also shared it with the GEF Secretariat for feedback. So this program is by no means cast in stone at this stage. While we have started some of the evaluations, like I was telling earlier, most are still at the future planning stage. I wanted to share these ideas with you because we would value your feedback or other ideas we should be looking into that the council would find useful. But let me give you a couple of highlights. As I mentioned already earlier, we will be continuing with the strategic country cluster evaluations that are this time covering drylands and the Mekong region. You may recall that we did such cluster evaluations earlier on LDCs, SIDS, and the African biomes around the Sahel. While the results of the earlier integrated programs and the IAPs from GEF6 are rolling in, we will deep dive in separate evaluations into the completed programs. In addition, we plan to do a formative evaluation of the newer programs focusing on design and implementation issues. And we will also cover the Global Wildlife Program with midterm results that will soon be available. And we will, in the context of the programs, we will also cover the knowledge platforms in depth. New themes will include learning from challenges and failures, as I mentioned earlier, community-based management approaches, as well as nature-based solutions. Like I indicated earlier, all evaluations will look into issues including transformational change, additionality, innovation, and co-benefits, both what Rosina this morning called necessary for the durability of the global environmental benefits and those that are considered more coincidental. As always, we will also need to cover corporate themes such as governance of the GEF, the STAR, results-based management, private sector engagement, and policies more generally. For the first time, we also plan to have a specific thrust on the fiduciary policy, which has never been looked into before in an evaluation. The focus on these policies will be on policy implementation. We will also undertake an early review of the country engagement strategy that is now being refined. So here's just how we have at this stage planned to use our budget over GEF8, and there'll be more details next year. It reflects the same kind of cycle as in all replenishment periods, with the evaluation budget peaking at the time when we complete component evaluations for the next OPS. I'm very thankful for the increased budget for this next phase approved as part of the replenishment process, because this will enable us to cover the various dimensions of the expanded GEF programming, and of course, not least the integrated programs. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Well, firstly, I want to thank Kito for presenting IEO's two evaluations, which also contain some very specific recommendations for the Secretary to consider. And also want to thank Vito for drawing the Council's attention to some of the information notes that they have shared. So before I open the floor for any comments or questions, I want to ask Gustavo to present the management responses to those two specific evaluations.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Juha and Gita, for the two evaluations, or the study plus the evaluation. I want to take a lot of time from the session here because you have the management response in materials, but let me just highlight a few points in particular when it deals with the recommendations. First of all, the Secretariat welcomes the study on resilience, climate change adaptation, and climate risks in the GEF Trust Fund, and we find it to be very informative and very useful. On the first recommendation of the study to develop guidance on climate risk mitigation measures, the Secretariat takes note of the recommendation. The Secretariat has already taken steps to address climate risk, including concerning mitigation measures, as it is recognized in the report itself and in Gita's presentation. The Secretariat would like to point out that the GEF Environmental Social Safeguards Policy, as also mentioned in the evaluation, already covers the systematic consideration of short and long-term risks posed by climate change and other natural hazards throughout the design and implementation of projects and programs. As in the 2019 staff guidance on climate risk screening sets out, agencies are to outline in project documents if resilience practices and measures to address projected climate change and its impacts have been considered and how they will be addressed. GEF agencies are therefore best positioned to develop context-specific climate risk mitigation measures and to adjust the project design to ensure that the variety of climate risks that a project can face will be adequately factored in. Going forward, the Secretariat will continue facilitating interagency dialogues during the GEF 8 phase in order to enhance cross-pollination on best practices in climate risk responsive project design in GEF operations. On the second recommendation, which covers improving the monitoring of resilience in GEF projects with attention in the context of each focal area, the Secretariat also takes note of the recommendation. As clearly noted in the IEO study, the GEF Trust Fund is not focused on climate change adaptation or climate resilience, as these are not explicitly defined objectives in the GEF Trust Fund programming, but in the project results framework does not include adaptation or climate resilience specific indicators. Furthermore, the IEO report notes several limitations in efforts to measure how integration of resilience, climate change adaptation, and climate risks into projects affected project outcomes in different ways. These highlights the challenges of monitoring climate resilience and adaptation benefits of GEF Trust Fund projects. Notwithstanding these challenges, there are existing provisions within the project monitoring system that can potentially enable the capture and the reporting on any aspects of climate resilience in GEF projects. The GEF 8 replenishment negotiations were clear in requesting the GEF Secretariat to work towards streamlining the GEF project cycle into a more comprehensive and integrated framework and to implement efficiency measures in line with the IEO OPS 7 recommendations. Therefore, rather than adding any new measures to monitor climate resilience benefits, the Secretariat will strengthen the use of the existing policy provisions in order to improve the monitoring of resilience in GEF projects and within the context of the limitations that I explained before. Now, turning to the management response on the evaluation of the GEF support to sustainable forest management. First, the Secretariat welcomes the IEO evaluation, which is the first comprehensive evaluation of GEF support to sustainable forest management. And we really appreciate this very comprehensive study. On the recommendation 1 that says that the GEF needs to enhance GEF SFM strategy to include all elements necessary for a comprehensive, clearly articulated and visible long-term vision and strategy for SFM, Secretariat takes note of the recommendation. The Secretariat would like to emphasize that a clear, articulated, and continuously evolving SFM vision and strategy has always been part of its scope, has always been fully aligned with the goals and objectives of the 3 conventions, and since 2000 also with the UN Forum on Forest, UNFF. GEF's vision and strategy for SFM has indeed progressed through adaptation to specific context over the period covered by the evaluation, and further evaluations are expected in GEF 8. All strategic developments have occurred in line with the respective GEF programming directions and in the context of global policies for forest, from donor countries and country priorities. The IO evaluation itself acknowledges these facts clearly. While the GEF programming directions does include all elements of the GEF SFM strategy, the Secretariat takes note of the findings and conclusions of the IO evaluation and agrees with the importance of the visibility of the SFM strategy. And to enhance this visibility, the Secretariat proposes to elaborate a strategy that will present all of the various aspects of GEF's cross-cutting SFM approach and return to you for that scrutiny. On recommendation 2 of the SFM evaluation, that says to strengthen monitoring of socio-economical benefits and promote learning. The Secretariat welcomes the recommendation, noting that it is continuously striving to strengthen the monitoring of socio-economic benefits and to promote learning and knowledge exchange in the entire GEF portfolio. The GEF partnership is already working on several elements included in the recommendation, notably on enhancing monitoring, the use of geospatial information, and on knowledge management. A further enhancement of knowledge management is being implemented or planned through the GEF 7 and GEF 8 integrated programs related to SFM. All of these programs include regional or global platforms aiming at enhancing knowledge management and wider communication on GEF's SFM investments and results. The Secretariat notes, however, that capturing the multiple SFM dimensions using relevant SFM indicators can be challenging. And a reasonable balance needs to be achieved between capture essential information at the GEF corporate level and the need for more granular information. On recommendation 3, to support specific national and local priorities to manage trade-offs and maintain benefits, the Secretariat welcomes the recommendation and agrees with the importance of supporting specific national and local priorities and managing trade-offs, which are both crucial elements of policy coherence at the national level. Strengthening the capacity of national and local organizations and improving SFM enabling conditions through integrated planning and policy developments already constitute important elements of many SFM GEF funded projects and programs. Among GEF investments supporting IPLCs to implement SFM, it's worth mentioning, in particular, the dedicated program working with IPLCs in GEF 7, which we call the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, which is increasing the level of SFM project funding for IPLCs. The consideration of IPLC rights and funding will remain key elements in many of the future GEF projects and programs. The Secretariat would like to underline that strengthening governance, including forest rights and land tenure, features that are prominently highlighted throughout the GEF 8 programming directions, especially in the SFM-related integrated programs of Amazon, Congo, and critical forest biome and forest integration are well articulated. SFM is a dedicated area of work of the small grants program, and SGP 2.0 will provide enhanced opportunities, especially in collaboration with IPs, for broadening the small grants further and to work on SFM at the community level with local stakeholders, including CSOs. The Secretariat especially welcomes the recommendation to continue working to influence upstream policies on forests and identify, track, and address drivers of deforestation beyond the forest sector. This is an essential element of landscape approaches, which show GEF forest-related investments beyond the forest sector. Furthermore, and to conclude, on engaging with broader contextual factors affecting forests, the Secretariat would like to point to a very strong focus throughout the GEF strategy, and in particular in the Amazon, the Congo, and other critical forest biomes IPs, which is policy coherence. In the future, this will be one key lever for the GEF to influence across multiple sectors, the policies and investments which impact forests. With that, I thank you, and over to you, Ambassador Fituria.
Well, thank you, Gustavo, for, you want, yeah, I give the floor to Carlos.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thanks, Gustavo, for the response on behalf of the Secretariat, and thanks to you and Gita for the both reports. I will try to complement with a big picture in terms of sustainable management of forests. When you talk about sustainable management of forests, a forester understands that we're cutting wood, logging forests, but this is not what the GEF does. As a matter of fact, we do it. We do support community-based management of native forests. We have done it in Mexico, we have done it in Guatemala, we have done it in a few Amazon basin countries. We have done it in the Mekong basin countries. We don't support large scale logging, even though we had some requests from some nations to support them. In the last 150 years, we have lost 1/3 of the natural forest, and don't think on just tropical forests. We're talking about tropical forests, temperate forests, and boreal forests, 1/3. Another third is highly degraded, and we still have 1/3 of the global forests of the planet in very good conditions. Without protecting 1/3 and restoring the other third, without doing that, we'll never achieve the 1.5 climate aspiration, and will never revert the rate of biodiversity loss. We will never be nature positive, not even in a decade or 2 decades. Primary forests are too precious to be logged. Unfortunately, countries, recipient countries and donor countries to the GEF, recipient countries to the GEF continue having policies to log at the industrial level forests. And donor countries to the GEF continue to provide incentives for private companies to continue doing that. This is done in the context of what the GEF wants to do, and this is done based on the context of what head of states agree last November with respect to the commitment of 104 head of states to halt deforestation by 2030. We got one good shot to revert the rate of global deforestation, and there is no other organization besides the GEF at this point with the know-how and the networks. And when I say the networks, I look at the agencies, because I talk about the GEF, and please don't get me wrong, it's not we at the Secretariat, it's the agencies who do the work. As a matter of fact, I have requests to visit some complicated countries where we do investments in forest conservation, and they have told me the CEO of the GEF cannot go there because this is an issue of personal security. Nevertheless, the agencies are there in the front line of a war that is happening right now within humans and between human and nature. Many of the large biomes where we do strategic investments are areas where me as the CEO of a GEF, because of an issue of national security, is unable to be there. And I thank the agencies for leading us and helping us to be where nobody wants to be. And this is a war. In many of the countries that we go, we don't know if the armed guy with a uniform is a park ranger or is a paramilitary. We don't know. We got everything there. We got trade, wildlife trade, bush meat, illegal mining. There is no rule of law. There is no governance at all. There are groups that has the control at the subnational level, and the only agency, the only multilateral agency is the GEF with the agencies. doing our best. Yes, you can get very, very impressed by the numbers that IEO is putting here, but this is just a small drop of the bucket in terms of what we need to do. Please look at the New York Times. Last week, the New York Times came with a report. It's called "Forest Floating Away," telling the story of what is happening with the primary forests of the Congo Basin nations, and tells the story of a country that we've been working for 30 years. In that country, the last 6 ministers of environment has been prosecuted for corruption and illegal logging. 6. And these are the conditions that we work. And again, when I say we, please look not at me or at Gustavo, look at the agencies. They are the ones who are in the field dealing with this situation. It's not glamorous, it's complicated. And the numbers may be impressive, but the scale of what we have in front of us is huge. I want to call the attention of everybody because if we don't understand what are the right things that we need to do in the next 5 to 10 years, we will lose 1/3 of the forest, primary forests that are there. And definitely one important element is the full implementation of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. There was a breakthrough last year in Glasgow with respect to Article 6, but I'm still very confused of where this is taking us in terms of the climate negotiation. COP27 will be extremely important, but if we are not able to create a positive incentive to keep those forests standing and being able to restore forests, we will never be able to revert the negative incentives for land use change. If we are not able to assign a fair price for carbon credits, which basically matches the cost of opportunity of doing the wrong things in the landscape, we will never achieve in protecting them. The other element that I think is extremely important is the role that we do with local communities and indigenous groups. In the tropics, local communities and indigenous groups, they are the stewards of 80% of the native primary forests. And Gustavo did mention the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. By far, this is the largest multilateral mechanism that is working with indigenous communities in the tropics and some other areas within developing countries in addressing issues associated to rights and land tenure and governance. And yes, of course, during GEF 8, we will be bringing very concrete and specific requests to the Council on how we will be building on this great initiative that is called the Inclusive Conservation Initiative. So we should feel really challenged by what we have in front of us. And just definitely, without any doubt, the GEF has been in the front lines of this effort of protecting natural ecosystem, in this case, as forests. When you see the term sustainable management of forests, please see a protected area, see co-management, see environmental services, see carbon, water, biodiversity, a big package that we need to be able to consolidate based on the investment that we have done for many years. So thank you so much. And thanks Gustavo, Juha, and Gita for what we just heard from you all. Thanks, Chair.
Well, I'd like to thank the IEO team of Vito and Kita, and likewise also the GEF Secretariat in Gustavo and now Carlos. And also thank you for injecting some reality checks in our conversation. So I think this is very important. So having said that, I now want to open the floor for any questions and comments from the Council. Could you please identify whether it's IEO or the Secretariat that your question is intended for, to help facilitate and expedite our consideration of this particular agenda item? Tom was the first one, so you have the floor, Tom, and then we'll ask others to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Just like the staff chair said, Carlos Manuel is truly a force of nature when he's passionate about something. On behalf of Renee over there, who reminded us about water, and also my colleagues back home, as well as Emily here, they asked me to intervene to strongly support the IEO's intention to bring forward an evaluation of GEF and water security to be presented at the June 20, well, next year. And a water security seems to be something that is of increasing significance to a lot of people. It is considered at the UNCCD called drought. And then whenever we talk about food security, which is now being considered by quite a lot of the leaders at various summits, including one this weekend, food and water security seems to be together. So we really welcome the intention to bring it forward very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next on my list is Gabriella of Switzerland, to be followed by Clemens of France. Gabriella, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the IEO for the evaluations, the presentation, all your good work, and thanks to Gustavo and Carlos for your management response. And yeah, Carlos, that's why policy coherence is so incredibly important. And I hope we can work further on that based on what you're reflecting on, knowing that you have worked in this space for a very long time yourself. So we're looking forward to that. Now, speaking to the sustainable forest management evaluation, we welcome the positive findings and the SFM's contribution to achieving the GEF's target and generating global environmental benefits. And we fully support the IEO's conclusions and recommendations, in particular, the need to continuously invoice M&E and learning, the need to articulate clear long-term visions and sound strategies, also speaks to the point that Carlos just made, and the need to focus on the sustainability of the interventions beyond the project duration. We would have appreciated a more forward-looking answer to the first recommendation, in particular, with regards to the management response, and understand how the issue has or will be addressed in the IP's design, in particular the Amazon, Congo, and critical forest biomes. And we would also be interested to hear whether the GEF Secretariat will also consider adaptive management of forests in the context of SFM. And maybe you can further elaborate on that from the Secretariat side. We will have an input with regards to outreach in the context of UNFF and maybe presenting the evaluation, but we can do that bilaterally. With regards to the climate risk adaptation and resilience evaluation, we welcome the findings that resilience, adaptation, and climate risks are increasingly being integrated into the GEF strategy and projects, and that the integration trends to have a positive impact on project outcome. We take note of the finding that the definitions of these terms are not quite clear, especially for resilience. But we recognize that this is by no means just a problem of the GEF alone. We would still encourage the GEF to further clarify the terms. I think Rosina already made a comment to that when she spoke before. We appreciate also that the finding that the GEF has useful tools. However, we note that the guidance on their use could be improved and encourage the GEF to follow up on the IEO recommendation and provide agency with the necessary support. And finally, the management response to the IEO recommendation to improve the monitoring of climate resilient benefits, in our view, makes sense, especially to strengthen the existing measures and provisions rather than to add new ones. Having said this, we do expect the Secretariat to report meaningfully on climate resilient benefits in the future, also in light of the agreed GEF 8 replenishment package. And there were quite strong voices with regards to tracking adaptation benefits, and we would be very interested to hear how you're planning to do that moving forward in the context of GEF 8. Then lastly, to the IEO, with regards to your work program outlook with regards to GEF 8, we understand the star location evaluation will probably be part of the implementation of GEF policies that you had on your list. That's a very important one for us. And we would also be interested to have an evaluation on co-financing, and knowing that there have been challenges around co-financing a lot of in-kind co-financing and so on, just to better understand what is actually going on under that, which will then also maybe enable us to further strengthen that policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriel. I give the floor to Clemens of France to be followed by Abigail of USA. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Co-président. Nous remercions le Bureau indépendant d'évaluation pour sa présentation et les 2 rapports d'évaluation et le secrétariat pour les éléments de réponse. Les activités du Sustainable Forest Management sont particulièrement intéressantes et génèrent de nombreux co-bénéfices pour les thématiques de biodiversité, changement climatique, déforestation et dégradation des terres. Comme mentionné par Carlos Manuel, nous souhaitons appuyer à nouveau en particulier l'intérêt de la France pour l'engagement du FEM pour la préservation de la biodiversité. Nous notons dans cette évaluation une ouverture à un plus grand nombre d'agences au sein du SFM, en particulier des ONG internationales et des banques de développement régionales. Et en cohérence avec les recommandations de politique pour FEM 8, nous encourageons à renforcer encore davantage la diversité des agences de mise en œuvre et à ainsi réduire la concentration des agences dans le cadre des financements du SFM. Concernant l'évaluation sur le risque climatique, l'adaptation et la résilience, nous souhaitons noter également la cible de co-bénéfice de 45% pour l'adaptation au changement climatique dans le cadre des engagements sur la période FEM 8 qui a été fixée dans le cadre des négociations de reconstitution. Nous souhaiterions insister sur l'importance de fournir des éléments clairs aux agences de mise en œuvre, en particulier concernant les recommandations ou lignes directrices sur les mesures d'atténuation du risque climatique. Finalement, sur le programme de travail, nous sommes très intéressés par ce programme de travail en cours et nous notons particulièrement l'intérêt de développer une évaluation sur les impacts du Covid sur les projets, les difficultés rencontrées dans les projets ou encore les approches intégrées dans les petits États insulaires en développement. Nous serons également intéressés par l'évaluation sur les solutions fondées sur la nature. Pour la suite, nous souhaiterions que ces 3 enjeux liés à la nouvelle période de reconstitution puissent effectivement être considérés et approfondis par le Bureau indépendant d'évaluation dans les évaluations qui seront développées sur la période FEM 8. Donc, il s'agit de l'enjeu de la concentration des agences, de l'ouverture à la flexibilité totale d'utilisation de l'enveloppe STAR et enfin le développement de l'approche intégrée. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Clemens. Give the floor to Abigail of the United States of America to be followed by Ben of the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. I first want to express our appreciation for the IEO's work on the studies and for the Secretariat's consideration and responses to the reports. And in particular, I appreciate Carlos Manuel's effort to really link these kind of the substance of these evaluations to the kind of urgent problems that are going on right now in terms of really making progress on forest conservation quickly. And we do appreciate the Secretariat's leadership over many years in the area of sustainable forest management, and particularly efforts to empower Indigenous peoples and local communities. We welcome the Secretariat's proposal to create and share widely a more visible and long-term strategy for sustainable forest management, a clearly articulated strategy that builds upon the strategic directions of SFM programming and successes and integrates lessons learned in evolving context will help guide the continued success of the GEF's programs in this area. We asked the Secretariat to ensure that the strategy incorporates the recommendations of the IEO, which I'm sure you are planning on doing. We also we'd like to see a role for the International Tropical Timber Organization in the development of the strategy, given their unique expertise. We look forward to updates on the strategy and also suggestions for better ways to monitor socioeconomic co-benefits in this area without overburdening the agencies and the countries. And I think in particular, Given the focus on the global focus on forests, which is urgently needed, it's important that the GEF really get the messages about your experience in this area out to other agencies and other institutions, because you've developed a lot of expertise and experience, and it's we want people to learn from your experiences. Now, turning to the study on climate risk adaptation and resilience, we're pleased to see that GEF strategies and projects are providing adaptation and resilience co-benefits in addition to mitigation, understanding that GEF's mandate to focus on mitigation. We also appreciate that GEF has taken concrete steps to improve its climate integration, such as more explicit climate hazard mitigation requirements in the revised safeguards policy, the climate risk screening tool, and interagency trainings and dialogues to share best practices. These are important steps forward, and we look forward to building on this momentum. We encourage the Secretariat to continue to identify ways that it can address the IEO's finding that there needs to be greater clarity on quality review of climate risk screening. Obviously, this is a challenging topic, and I know that many different institutions are looking, especially with the move toward institutions trying to align operations with the Paris Agreement. There's a lot of work going on climate risk screening and best practices. So I think it's important for the GEF to provide guidance to agencies, but also to learn from what other agencies are doing and trying to develop their screening tools. We encourage the Secretariat to provide additional guidance to help agencies better understand and implement climate risk screening tools, and to integrate this into GEF programming. And we look forward to hearing updates from the Secretariat on these actions. And then if I can turn just briefly to the work program, I just want to echo Switzerland's comment about our interest in adding to the list of proposed evaluations, one on an evaluation of co-financing. I think it would be helpful for everyone here at the Council to better understand the sources of co-financing, obstacles to having co-financing, and then the conditions across projects that seem to lead to better leverage of co-financing. Happy to follow up with you further to the IEO on these points separately, but thank you all for all of the effort that went into these evaluations and to the responses.
Thank you, Abigail, for those questions and suggestions. I give the floor to Pen of the United Kingdom, to be followed by Yoshiko of Japan.
Many thanks, Co-Chair, and many thanks for the detailed presentations, and following from just Abby just said, thanks for all the work which has gone into those documents, and thanks to Juha for the presentation, and Gustav for the management response. And apologies, as maybe others, for the detail being covered in this, but we are covering 3 different agenda items. So starting with the agenda item, I think it was 9, just in terms of the work program and the annex, which was helpfully covering some of the work program going forward. We welcome the guidelines that the information document how you mentioned in terms of the program evaluations. I look forward to the product of that in maybe 4 years' time. We welcome the future work program, and just quick comments on that. Certainly welcome the proposed evaluation on CBIT and nature-based solutions. It's useful to hear that you're going to be having evaluations which will be focusing on innovation, transformation, and co-benefits too. The country engagement strategy evaluation also looks good. Other things that we've been thinking about in terms of GEF is in terms of protected areas and whether any evaluations cover that. I think there was evaluations in 2007 and 15. And also, I note that there's a lot of interest in payment for ecosystem services, and I'm not sure if an evaluation or maybe in a stat paper is the way to go on this one, but again, maybe useful to have further conversations with the GEF Secretariat on that one. Turning to agenda item number 10 on sustainable forest management, welcome the potentially long overdue assessment of nearly 30 years worth of implementing SFM. Pleased to see the steady growth of sustainable forest management projects throughout the replenishments. we note the critical commitments made at COP26 around forests, including the Glasgow's Leaders Declaration to halt and reverse forest loss and degradation, as passionately flagged by the CEO just now, and also to flag the role of GEF to support countries to deliver on these commitments. We note the findings of these projects were considered more sustainable and effective when IPLCs were meaningfully involved in projects, and support to improve national institution capacity and policies were provided. We welcome the Secretariat's response on both of these, and that greater attention will be paid for both of these under GEF 8s. We would welcome clarification why forest protection results in Africa were comparatively lower compared to other regions, despite the region having the second highest number of projects and the second largest volume of financing. Similarly, we would welcome further clarification from the Secretariat why lessons from the study will be incorporated into the forest IPs, particularly with a focus on the Congo Basin, where the IU noted implementation capacity constraints, and there's a growing number of initiatives that will require coordination if transformation change is to be achieved. We know that after 30 years of GEF, we encourage continued systematic monitoring and learning of effective sustainable forest management approaches to inform future GEF projects. We will provide more on that evaluation in writing. Finally, on the agenda item 11 on climate risk adaptation and resilience, the UK welcomes the IEO study, and that the IEO found evidence that positive project outcomes have occurred where climate change, resilience, and adaptation have been integrated into projects. We also agree with IEO's note that GEF has a unique role to integrate climate change, adaptation, resilience across the sectors it works in. Climate change will affect all aspects of our economies, and we encourage the GEF to continue this integration. We note that some of the findings from the IEO are familiar to us bilaterally in our efforts to align our ODA with Paris Agreement, where we also deploy climate risk screening. We welcome the GEF's management response, noting that existing guidelines in environmental and social safeguard policy and a recent training session with agencies on this. We encourage efforts to continue to strengthen the climate risk screening tool and agency understanding to how to apply that, building on the more detailed guidance developed for recent training sessions and its regular use throughout project delivery to ensure opportunities for climate adaptation and resilience are understood and grasped. We also support the GEF's need to balance any additional reporting requirements recommended with the need to streamline the GEF's project cycle and implement efficiency measures in order to speed up the design and implementation of GEF projects. However, we note the importance of ensuring that evidence of effective adaptation resilience building approaches under GEF projects are captured to inform future projects, and we'd welcome clarification from the Secretariat how this evidence will be captured to strengthen the climate risk screening and project design process. Many thanks for your indulgence.
Thank you, Ben, for your contribution to consideration of these two agenda items. I give the floor to Yoshiko of Japan, to be followed by Laura of Colombia.
Thank you to the IEO for presenting this valuable evaluation and the Secretariat for producing this management response. We first recommended that these valuable evaluation recommendations be reflected more explicitly in our current council decisions, like what we did at our council meeting in 2020 in decision 2427 for consistency. This IP, the Sustainable Forest Management IP in our view is an incredibly important IP because first, it clearly addresses the 3 Rio Conventions towards the generation of some very large global environmental benefits. And second, it's important for us to address the relative underachievement of the terrestrial environmental targets. We took note of the deficiencies that have yet to be addressed via GEF interventions in this area and hope that this will be taken into account and reflected in the decision that factors into the IDO recommendation, particularly in recommendation 3 explicitly. The deficiency we note is that paragraph 64, GEF's focus on plant species and illegal timber has been comparatively small and has done less than some key informants expected to pilot SFM activities and related to promoting REDD+ and production forests. And paragraph 67, some deforestation hotspots appear comparatively underfunded by the GEF. So I think some of these points need to be reflected. In addition to paragraph 93, which cites factors hindering projects as limited capacities of lead agencies that lack stakeholder engagement. So we echo France in that regard on comments about increasing agencies SFM related to in light of this evaluation. We think that in particular, whether in capacity as execution agency or knowledge management or expert advice, we think that engagement of intergovernmental specialized organizations such as ITTO should be leveraged in a manner that's similar to CITES, especially following its revamp of its recent governance and execution structure. Reflecting the IEO recommendations in the decision, particularly recommendation 3, which addresses some of these deficiencies, we therefore suggest introducing text in a manner similar to decision 2427. In this manner, the council, having reviewed document 62/02, and the management response endorses the following recommendations, and just cite the recommendations. And in recommendation 3, we'd also include, we would cite explicitly the GEF partnership should take measures to support national and local organizations to strengthen capacity, improve SFM enabling conditions, and that this includes considering leveraging the small grants under SPG 2.0. Especially because I think it's relevant to this program, and we will produce this in writing. On climate, we also broadly agree with recommendations given and support U.S. comments and focusing on mitigation, which is Jeff's mandate. Also supports Swiss and U.S. comments on evaluation of co-financing, I think, which is very, very timely. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoshiko. It's a bit of a distance from here, but I think it's Laura from Colombia. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. On behalf of the constituency of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, we would like to thanks to the Independent Evaluation Office for the evaluation of GES support for sustainable forest management, and also to the Secretariat for the response. We recognize, as some colleagues has commented, this study and its recommendation as an effective mechanism by which the GEF can enhance its impact on forest management and the fight against illegal deforestation on a global level. We especially highlight recommendation 3 on this evaluation, which states that the GEF should continue working with government partners and agencies to influence upstreaming policies on forests and identify, track, and address drivers of deforestation beyond the forest sector. In that way, we can improve in policy coherence. We consider this to be an important achievement of the Amazon Sustainable Landscape Program along these years, and we welcome all partners, stakeholders, and also IPLCs involved in this successful program that has brought important social and economic co-benefits. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Laura. I give the floor to Ramon of Spain, to be followed by Alf of Norway.
Muchas gracias. En primer lugar, queríamos sumarnos a tu reconocimiento, Carlos, un poco del valor de las agencias como trabajo en primera línea. También queremos apoyar un poco esa evaluación propuesta en tema de cofinanciación por Suiza, Estados Unidos. Y ya entrando en materia de la gestión forestal sostenible, esa estrategia propuesta por la Oficina de Evaluación Independiente, nos gustaría destacar que el sector forestal no es un sector aislado en el territorio, sino que está muy vinculado con otros sectores económicos, por lo que proponemos una estrategia integral que tenga en cuenta los vínculos con sectores como la agricultura, el desarrollo urbano, cuestiones como la fragmentación de las infraestructuras de transporte, la trazabilidad en las cadenas de suministro, etc. Además, creemos que la mirada hacia el sector forestal debe ser regional, teniendo en cuenta las condiciones biogeográficas, la propiedad de la tierra, la percepción social, especialmente de los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales. También vemos un claro vínculo entre la conservación de los ecosistemas forestales y el acceso a los recursos genéticos y el reparto justo de sus beneficios. El documento de Management Response enfatiza el vínculo con los programas integrados de Amazonía, Congo y la restauración de ecosistemas. Nos gustaría destacar también el programa Net Zero, Nature Positive Accelerator, debido a su potencialidad, sus posibilidades y su enfoque innovador. Estamos de acuerdo en la necesidad de reforzar el seguimiento de los beneficios socioeconómicos del bosque. Es crucial entender los múltiples beneficios que nos aportan los ecosistemas forestales y cuantificar su valor. En términos de clima, de calidad del aire, biodiversidad, control de inundaciones, protección del suelo, recarga de acuíferos, etc. Todo esto, dar valor a todas estas externalidades es fundamental y relevante, tanto para mejorar la gobernanza, evitar la deforestación e involucrar al sector privado en la conservación y la gestión sostenible. Compartimos la necesidad de promover el aprendizaje, especialmente el conocimiento sur-sur es fundamental en esta materia, donde las soluciones están muy restringidas por las condiciones locales. Y creemos que la fase piloto de la plataforma de conocimiento y colaboración para puntos focales del GEF, especialmente las lecciones aprendidas y las buenas prácticas, es una iniciativa positiva que habría que potenciar y de manera destacada en el ámbito forestal. Y en materia de adaptación, simplemente nos alegramos de la integración de la resiliencia en los proyectos, que se haya incrementado en los sucesivos periodos de reposición. Creemos que los retos medioambientales deben abordarse de forma holística, evitando enfoques únicamente sectoriales y con límites administrativos. Y debemos avanzar en esta materia. Apreciamos este reconocimiento de que la resiliencia y la adaptación están integradas también en los proyectos del GEF Track Fund y de que existen oportunidades aprovechando las sinergias entre mitigación y adaptación, en línea con las indicaciones del IPCC. Una de las conclusiones del documento del Management Response es que la Secretaría seguirá reforzando el diálogo institucional y el intercambio de mejores prácticas para su difusión en favor del interés público. Partiendo de la recomendación de elaborar orientaciones para mitigar los riesgos climáticos, creemos que estos son lecciones fundamentales en una sociedad, en un contexto de cambio climático, y que instituciones como el GEF deben trabajar conjuntamente con otros fondos climáticos y con los bancos multilaterales de desarrollo en esta tarea, tomando la iniciativa, abriendo camino y compartiendo conocimientos con el sector privado y con los proyectos comerciales, en beneficio de toda la sociedad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Spain, for your comments. I give the floor to Alf of Norway, to be followed by Maria of the CSO network.
Thank you. We've divided up the agenda items a bit, so I have some comments on item 10, and Emilia has on 9 and 11. So with regard to the sustainable forest management, we'd like to thank you for sharing the evaluation document and for giving us the opportunity to reflect on the forest-related work the GEF has undertaken over the last 3 decades. Overall, the report is comprehensive and well-reasoned, and we agree with its main conclusions. We recognize the importance of integrating international and development goals related to forests and the need to addressing the trade-offs and benefits of SFM interventions. Ensuring the longevity and sustainability of projects will be a key, reducing the time lags between project design and implementation, and in determining lessons learned and recommendations for moving forward. We support developing a clear and comprehensive vision and strategy for sustainable forest management, including more standardization of project metrics and reporting to address the gaps and inconsistencies in monitoring, evaluation, and learning. The document notes that there have been challenges in assessing the GEF's contributions to REDD+, and that investments in REDD+ phase 1 have not yielded widespread progression to subsequent REDD+ phases. In line with the report's recommendation of a clear long-term vision for SFM, we would support a more systematic approach for tracking project-specific contributions to REDD+, including potential to scale projects up to the national or jurisdictional level. While the GEF has a vast geographic coverage in its SFM projects, the evaluation document highlights that projects in some deforestation hotspots appear to be underfunded. This may be mitigated by further emphasis on critical forest biomes in GEF 8. We are furthermore interested in learning more about how GEF can deliver improved equity, specifically relating to addressing the barriers to effective participation and engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities during SFM program implementation. This is a key challenge highlighted in the evaluation documents. We are very pleased to see that the Secretariat, in its management response, welcomes the 3 main recommendations about sustainable forest management. We note that the Secretariat finds it challenging to fully capture the multiple SFM dimensions using relevant SFM indicators, and especially welcome their proposal to enhance visibility of SFM by elaborating a strategy document to be widely shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Alf. I give the floor to Maria of the CSO network.
sorry.
Beef.
Co-chair, we just have a few more comments on
Oh,
agenda item
okay, you
11
have the floor.
from our constituency, sorry. And we also welcome the study on climate risk adaptation and resilience, along with the response from the Secretariat, as this topic has been important to our constituency. It's encouraging that the findings show an increasing trend in the integration of resilience and adaptation and climate risk considerations across the GEF portfolio, especially since the study shows a positive correlation between resilience and adaptation integration with project outcomes. And we would like to know if any of these lessons have been shared with other funds, such as the GCF and the Adaptation Fund. We also appreciate the now mandatory inclusion of climate risk screenings, but note the IEO findings point to an absence of appropriate risk mitigation measures and plans. And in this regard, we support the Secretariat's response to work with agencies to improve on risk responsiveness, and we look forward to be updated on this. We also take note of the IEO's findings regarding the somewhat limited uptake of the Raptor tool. And in this regard, we would encourage, if it is still relevant, a revision or a simplification of the Raptor to make it more user-friendly. And finally, we also support the proposals of Switzerland, US, and Japan to include in the IEO work program an evaluation regarding the co-finance in the GEF portfolio, as we consider this timely. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Maria, you have the floor, to be followed by Karin of Sweden. Thank you.
Gracias. Le damos la bienvenida a la evaluación realizada por la Oficina Independiente. Realmente es un trabajo que merece ser revisado en detalle y bueno, son 30 años de trabajar juntos detrás de estos objetivos. En detalle va a estar María Elena contándonos.
Bueno, pues en esta gestión sostenible de bosques, visualizamos y estamos muy contentos de escuchar que es un proceso incluyente. Visualizamos que el tema de tenencia de la tierra como una gestión sostenible de bosques y en este respaldo como política de los Small Grant Programs a trabajar con las organizaciones de la sociedad civil es un acierto. Consideramos que en esta conservación inclusiva que aborda la tenencia de la tierra, en esta oportunidad visualizamos la diversificación económica y la integración de cadenas de valor como una multiplicación de los beneficios económicos y para bajar los impactos sobre estas zonas forestales. Y que en estas cadenas de valor se encuentra también el turismo. Y esto lo tiene muy claro las comunidades porque saben que la conservación de las áreas forestales se va a traducir en otros componentes económicos como es el turismo. Entonces, estas salvaguardas ambientales y sociales se van a transformar precisamente en economía que va con esta visión de cuenca que bien han mencionado, van a pasar estas responsabilidades hacia otros sectores en términos de la diversificación y también en términos de los servicios ambientales cuenca abajo, porque son los usuarios del agua, como el sector turismo en zonas costeras. Entonces, me parece que por ahí hay oportunidades de sumar a diversos actores. Gracias.
Gracias, María Elena.
I thank the representatives of the CSO network for their contribution to the discussion. I give the floor to Gerrit of Sweden to be followed by Sylvia of Germany.
Thank you. I would like to thank the IAO for their presentation and the GEF for their management response. I'd like to support the intervention by Switzerland regarding resilience and want to encourage the Secretariat to explore the possibility to more clearly define the concept of resilience to facilitate GEF monitoring in this regard. And also, I'd like to support the suggestion made by Switzerland on an evaluation on co-financing that was also supported by the US. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I give the floor to Sylvia of Germany to be followed by Richard of Australia.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief with a view to the time. I would like to thank the IO for its work and the Secretariat for its responses. We welcome the work program as laid out by the IO and especially the envisaged work on socioeconomic benefits, NBS, the COVID impacts, the CES and fiduciary standards, as well as the suggested studies on co-finance. And with regard to co-finance, we also invite the IO to look into practices by other funds. Yet, however, maybe I overlooked it, but I would also invite the IO to please not lose sight of gender issues in all of its work and to maybe see how this can be integrated in the planned evaluations. On the specific evaluations, with regards to the sustainable forest management, Germany appreciates the recommendations for the future GEF SFM projects, particularly that future projects shall include a solid monitoring and evaluation framework and that land rights of indigenous people and local communities are included where feasible. Furthermore, we would appreciate it if the GEF would have a close look at gender aspects in forest value chain and the important role women play in agroforestry systems. With regards to the study on adaptation and resilience, I would like to echo the points made by France and Switzerland with regards to the new GEF goal on adaptation benefits. We know it's a very fine line the GEF has to walk here with regards to its mandate. Yes, we think that GEF has to come from a risk screening approach to a more active mainstreaming approach and should look for active synergies between mitigation and adaptation activities to make efficient use of scarce GEF resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I now give the floor to Richard of Australia.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations from the presentation from the IEO. Firstly, on the work program, thank you for the proposal. It looks very comprehensive. Just a few minor points. First of all, welcome the inclusion of the evaluation on behavioural change. That's an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to the outcomes of that evaluation. Secondly, I note that there's an evaluation on nature-based solutions in Forward Year 24. Given the focus on nature-based solutions presently and going into COP and beyond, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to consider moving that forward. It's potentially a really interesting one for the GEF in terms of integration of biodiversity, livelihoods and crossover to climate change, and I think will be very topical if it could be considered. I'm not sure if that's me squeaking. And thirdly, just to note the private sector evaluation in Forward Year 25, I suspect that timing may be appropriate, but the question is whether or not consideration could be given to bring it a year forward, but just to see the progress of the implementation of the private sector strategy, but note that the progress may not be sufficient by that point in time. So I think that's just a question from my perspective. And lastly, on the work program, I'm just wondering if consideration had been given to an evaluation of the extent to which GEF programs consider Indigenous consultation and engagement and involvement in the implementation of projects. We've certainly been discussing that over the last couple of days, and it's just a question that popped in my mind, the extent to which we have information in relation to that. In relation to the two evaluations, sustainable forest management, Firstly, thank you for the report. It's encouraging that the findings is the GEF is well positioned to support natural and effective integration. And we appreciate the continued focus through the GF8 cycle. We know that there are challenges involved in monitoring and evaluation data with capturing key information at the corporate level. And again, one of the questions is whether or not there could be opportunities for collaboration with other IEOs to try and address the barriers that are mentioned there. And lastly, welcome the comment or the recommendation in relation to strengthening monitoring and socioeconomic co-benefits associated and promote learning from that. And on the climate risk adaptation resilience evaluation, simply note appreciation for the evaluation. I found that very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I think that is the last speaker on this particular agenda item. I'd like to thank the Council for very valuable contributions in terms of some recommendations, support, and also some observations in terms of the way forward. So I will now give the floor to IEA, either Kita or Vito, and then Gustavo in that order to respond to some of the questions raised by Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you, Council members, for this very positive feedback on our evaluations as well as the work program. I think most of the issues that concern the IEO directly in this case pertain to our work program, and I have taken note of all the support to a number of evaluations, starting with the, of course, the integrated programs, but also water security, nature-based solutions, and others. Obviously, there is a clear demand, to put it that way, for an evaluation of co-financing, and I think we can promise to take that up. That came from so many of you, actually. Right. Now Richard was asking us about the timing of a couple of evaluations at the end. We will be happy to study that and look whether we can bring forward the evaluations of the nature-based solutions, and the private sector will have to see how it fits into our flow, but recommendation very well taken here. Well, yeah, we will certainly not lose sight of gender. You know, thank you, Sylvia, for the comment that we will. Gender is one of these aspects also that is mainstreamed, so to say, in all of our evaluations. And I look forward to talking with Gabriella about outreach to UNFF on the SFM evaluation. I think that's all from our side, or Geeta, you had something?
Yeah, I'll just add one or two other comments, just addressing them. Sharing lessons with other agencies. Definitely, since we've now presented this, it will be ripe for documenting 4-page and knowledge products, which we will share with other agencies. On the private sector engagement, we could move that up, but we also have to allow enough time to elapse for the implementation of the engagement strategy. However, we have focused on special themes on private sector. So for the last replenishment, we focused on the MSME portfolio. This time, the intention is probably to look at the way it's integrated in the impact programs, the role of the private sector, as well as the value chains. So we could focus on special themes prior to the full-blown evaluation of the engagement strategy. Thank you.
Sorry, one more thing was that also this issue about looking at the indigenous people's role and in consultation and involvement in the projects. We certainly, as part of the corporate evaluations towards the end of the cycle, we always look into the indigenous people's involvement. We will be happy to also to discuss how that evaluation can be further deepened and strengthened to look at the actual implementation experiences from the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Kita and Wito, for receptiveness to some of the recommendations and suggestions. So I give the floor to Gustavo now.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the many useful comments. And I think the evaluation and the recommendations, the management response are pretty clear. So I'm not going to be commenting on top of that. Just to clarify a few points that were raised, and just say that we agree with most all that have been said so far. On this question that many of you brought up on how can we address the issue of climate risk and adaptation. And I think we need to really unpack these two concepts. First, the climate risk will continue to require that agencies provide comprehensive reviews and risks, and in their risk matrix. Actually, STAP does a lot of that review. One of the important points that they have introduced in our PIF development process, and that we have followed very strictly, and then to highlight the risk management measures that are in line with the procedures that we have agreed upon between the GEF Secretariat, the staff, and the agencies. And this, of course, gets into the issues of how can we increase resilience so that climate risks can be mitigated, but it's not necessarily a question of measurement. But on the side of adaptation and getting co-benefits from the trust fund investments, this will be done, as we all discussed during the replenishment, with the use of the climate change adaptation Rio markers. And this is also clearly stated in the replenishment package. I think if I'm not, if I heard it well from France, from Relevance, biodiversity indeed has been a key entry point for GEF, SFM, particularly the IPs in this process, and particularly looking at primary forests, and also looking at how carbon interfaces with biodiversity objectives and in the definition of priorities. On the question of the strategy, yes, we will produce a visible and more comprehensive strategy. But I would like to point out that a strategy on SFM has always been with the GEFs ever since it began dealing with SFM, even before there was a definition on what SFM actually meant. And we participated very actively and co-led the process with the collaborative partnership on forests that served as kind of an advisory, a technical advisory body to UNFF to come up with a commonly agreed definition on sustainable forest management. And we evolved from SFM projects being merely multifocal area projects that combine resources from across the Rio Convention space to what we have today that really look into the major forest real estate in the world that are important for assets that are important regionally into the planet, as well as looking at very important remnants of forests that still have tremendous biological importance, as we are doing with the critical biomes now in GEF 8. So the strategy has evolved, and we'll try to document that in a more systematic way, so that we can all see how this has evolved over time, and the fact that we always had a strategy dealing with SFM. On the lessons that have been learned on the IPs, we are bringing these lessons, and for example, on the Amazon Sustainable Landscapes IP, we are really fostering share of knowledge with leaders and local leaders and agencies. And this is leading now to cross-fertilization with the Congo Basin as we have longer lasting investments in the Amazon Basin that are serving to promote cross-pollination, particularly in similar areas like the Congo Basin. The Amazon Sustainable Landscapes has also had national policy coherence at its core since the beginning, as well as policy harmonization across many of the Amazon countries as one of its many objectives. And this one in particular being to avoid leakage of threats of deforestation across national boundaries, which has been a problem, a historical problem in that region. So that's also another point that we would like to bring up. On the point about raised by Japan on the actual decision, as you may recall, we had decided, or you have decided, that to change the style of the management responses about a year ago. I think it was in the June 2021, in which this style of decision on evaluations and management responses, rather than enumerating each recommendation and a decision around each recommendation, now the council takes note of the related evaluations and recommendations and endorse the management response that addresses them. This is the practice that we have adopted now, and we would like to see if we're going to continue using this format, unless there's a particular reason for wanting to change back to the way that this was done before. So I mean, we are in your hands, but this was proposed by the governance group, and I think is the practice that we have adopted so far, and it's reflected on the current decision for the two evaluations that were presented before you. Okay, over to you, Ambassador.
Well, dear Council, you've heard the responses from the IEO and also from the Secretariat. I think there is a level of appreciation for the comments, the suggestions, and there's also a willingness to accommodate all those going forward. So the big question is, based on the responses so far, are you willing for us to adopt the resolutions, the draft decisions as contained in GEF C62/13/Rev01 and in GEF C62/14/Rev01? I'm looking around. I don't see any flags. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I just wanted to comment on the decision text. The reason why I brought this up is I recall very specifically, I think it was the more recent practice that we cited the recommendations given by the IEO, and it seems like from the management response, you broadly agree with the IEO recommendation. And given that we often have the need to go back to decision text, it's often very useful to have the actual recommendations in the decision itself as a reference. So that's why I think that this was a very good practice that was introduced. I think it was on the recommendation by Switzerland about maybe a little bit over a year ago. So that was the rationale behind my recommendation. I recall that we specifically changed that practice of what was presented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan, for bringing our attention to that. I give the floor to Vito to respond. Thank you.
Thanks very much. The current decision text, as it is reflected today, is actually the latest one that we have adopted, and this was actually originally recommended by the peer review, the external peer review of the evaluation function in the GEF, for the particular reason that that it actually puts the onus on the management of so that they will have to reflect in the management response more specifically what they plan to do in relation to the recommendations. And of course, they have the prerogative also then to disagree with the recommendations, which they this time didn't very much do. So I think the current practice is actually something that we like because of that reason. Thank you.
Based on that explanation, I'm looking at Japan. Are you happy for us to consider and adopt? Okay. So I take it that the council is agreeable to adopt the draft decisions. There are 2 draft decisions, and I've already read out GEF/C62/13 Rev 01 and GEF C62/14 Rev 01. See no objections. The 2 draft decisions have been adopted. Yeah, we're almost there. Almost there. We're now into agenda item 13. This is the report of the ad hoc working group on governance. I would like to invite Ms. Gabriela Plata, Chair of the Ad hoc Working Group on Governance, to present document GEF/C.62/15. This is the report of the Ad hoc Working Group on Governance.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just first clarify, because you were referring to the old document. I'm looking at Nicholas. The latest document has been uploaded on the website, right? Okay, he's nodding. Good. So it's actually the ref document that we're introducing. And that's the starting point of the intervention. Apologies to everyone that the document was there so late and was revised once more on, I think it was June 20th, so 2 days ago. Primarily due to the fact that, well, the ad hoc working group on governance is completely relying on council members' engagements, and we don't really have secretariat support. And many of us, especially myself, were very strongly engaged in other matters just before the council, i.e. the SB negotiations and UNFCCC. So having said all of that, we did go back and finally looked at the rules of procedures as well as the governing instrument, with a special focus on the co-chairing arrangement, which was the main mandate of the group that we still had to close the loop on. And we did make suggestions on amendments to both these documents. And if you look at the report, we do refer to that. The assessment of the group is that the co-chairing arrangement pilot has and is successful, and appreciate very much Ambassador Faturi now taking on this role also for the entire year. And we're actually proposing to continue with the pilot also all across next year, because the assembly will be postponed. So we want to prolong the pilot, which is also part of the decision language that we're suggesting. While we also looked at the rules of procedure and the governing instrument, we also looked at it with a fresh eye. Is there anything we need to update, which is outdated? For example, there's a reference to Agenda 21. Everyone in this room probably knows that we have adopted the Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. So it makes sense to actually refer to that and things like that. So it's minor edits, nothing major. In context of the rules of procedure, it's primarily changes to current practice. So updating the rules of procedure to the actual current practice. We changed the dates of the council meetings when they usually are and things like that. So nothing big. there's one paragraph in the rules of procedure that we have introduced in addition, which has actually already been, the practice was endorsed in the last ad hoc working group decision, that important policy documents should be circulated for comments ahead before they actually are tabled to the council for adoption. And we suggest that primarily to avoid situations like the one we had yesterday on the lead agency selection, because if the secretariat would circulate the documents, they would receive comments, they could integrate the comments. We also, somebody flagged, maybe we can change that language still a little bit to take into account that, for example, the secretariat reports back orally at the council about the key comments received, so that people also understand how the document has changed since it was first circulated. So that's a new practice which we have adopted. There's a recommendation from the group that was already endorsed by council last time, but we have observed that it has not been implemented, obviously. And so we suggest to integrate that into the rules of procedure. So it really is taking it forward, moving ahead. And there is one last thing which is open. There are the transitional paragraphs at the end of the governing instrument, which go back to the transition from the GET to the GEF Trust Fund. And the group just made the observation that maybe these paragraphs are really outdated. And if there's no legal reason to maintain them, we would suggest to just remove those since they are very outdated. But if the legal counsel of the GEF, and there was not sufficient time to fully assess that, or the legal counsel of any of the implementing agencies, especially the trustee, have concern with that, we would of course maintain the paragraphs. It was merely just in an idea to remove old text that is no longer needed. And with that, we suggest that the council doesn't take a decision on the changes to the governing instrument and the rules of the procedure right now. But at the next council meeting, we just wanted to bring all the changes to you so you have enough time to actually look at them, reflect on them. And if you have strong legal concerns with any of the changes, to also flag that to the secretariat, because with this, we also hand over the torch from the group back to the secretariat, who will now have to format the text, put it, prepare it really for a nice decision, because right now it's a messy track change. So I think, yeah, really work through the documents, make them look nice so that we can actually adopt them. So the GEF Council at its 63rd meeting would then take a decision on the rules of procedure and take a decision to recommend to the Assembly to alter the instrument, because the Council itself cannot alter the instrument. It's only the Assembly that can do that. So that would be the way forward. I don't know if any of the group members want to add anything. If there are any questions, we're here to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Gabriela, for rectifying that discrepancy in terms of the Rev 1. This is what happens when you come from different time zones. Sometimes we are a few hours late, so maybe that's why I didn't have the Rev 1 in my document. But we've heard you loud and clear, and thank you for the clarification for the benefit of members. Do I take it that we don't have to take a decision on this, but defer it to the next council meeting, or do we take a decision to defer consideration of this at the next council meeting?
So we take a decision which first prolongs the pilot for all of next year because of the postponement of the Assembly. And the second decision, which is a request to the Secretariat to work together with the former co-chair Mette and you on a manual for handover, so that we can facilitate handover from one co-chair to the next to facilitate the life of your successor. That was a practical idea that we took up also as a conversation we had with regards to the interviews. That's one paragraph that we're deciding. So it's a request to the Secretariat. And there is the deferral of decision, like and handing over of the text to the Council and the Secretariat for a decision on the rules of procedure and the recommendation with regards to the instrument at the next meeting. So we still have to take a decision, but the main decision on the rules of procedure and the governing instrument will be at the next council.
Thank you, Gabriela. So based on Gabriela's clarification, I put it to our council to adopt a decision as presented verbally, so that and the sort of substantive decision will be taken come the December council meeting. I see no violent objections, so it's taken. It's adopted. Thank you. Our next agenda item is agenda item 17. This is an update on preparations for the GEF 7th Assembly. I want to invite my friend Tom to give us an update in terms of preparations for the assembly for the benefit of the council. Thank you.
I was hoping for a transition book with speaking points because I have no idea what to say sometimes. Anyways, colleagues, I've been working very hard with my colleague Emily and many others to try to find a suitable place, and it will be in Vancouver. Since I grew up in Vancouver, I can tell you that because of the pandemic, because of the postponement of many events in 2020 and 2021, we were fortunate not to find any suitable venue in December. And so you are lucky that we're not going there in December. So with William Ehlers and many others, we are exploring with the market in Vancouver, a suitable venue in a window between something like May, June, July, whatever it is that makes sense. There's enough space with access to the water and access to the old growth forest that Carlos Manuel really loves. And of course, we have 3 indigenous nations there. And so more news on that. And since we are all public servants and friends here, I will tell you that we are doing it by the book. And so we have to, work with the GEF Secretariat, how many meals we need to procure, how many rooms and everything else. So it's a whole call for proposals, and we have to put it out in the market and say who can bid on it and who has enough room for us. And that's why in order so that my 2 sons can have their father for the rest of their life and not in jail for cutting deals, behind closed doors, we are doing properly. And I hope that Carlos Manuel and we will be able to give you the news as soon as possible so that you can make your plans for mid-year next year. And then hopefully, because I grew up in Vancouver, I would encourage you to think about going there not as just business, but also as a way to embrace nature and see and have that kind of experience. And I was looking for something from, I was recalling a Japanese practice of walking in the woods as being very good for your mental health, spiritual health, and everything else. So that is the only update that I have for you. So more news to come. And if I'm saying anything wrong, Carlos Manuel, please feel free to correct me.
Thank you, Tom. I'll give the floor to Carlos.
I'm not going to correct you on anything, Tom. On the contrary, I want to thank you so much to you, your team, and to our team as well, William, that has been working around the clock to be able to work on the next assembly. I want to remind everybody that this will be a non-conventional assembly. It's the first time that is done in a donor nation, and is done in conjunction with native nations, which is extremely important in the context of the long-term vision and commitment of the GEF. We know also very well that Canada has assumed this relevant responsibility in organizing the CPD COP next December. So there's a lot of things in their plate, and I want to thank you for that. Having the possibility to do a non-conventional GEF assembly take us to another level in terms of how we organize it, what we want to achieve out of that. I look forward to Gabriela's ideas of revisiting the instrument. There are things that, were created 30 years ago, and we need to look forward in the next 30 years. Probably the only thing that will correct you, Tom, is with regards to your remarks on forests. These are not any normal old growth forests. Let me be more specific. These are temperate rainforests, unique in the planet. We tend to believe that the rainforests are only located in the tropics. No, that is not correct. This is temperate rainforest, unique. So yes, Tom, we will organize some outdoors activities for the enjoyment of all the participants of our next GEF assembly. So thank you so much, Tom. We will continue working hard to provide more details and information to Council on our next assembly. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Carlos, for whetting our appetite in terms of looking forward to the assembly next year. I understand that a decision on dates and venue will be adopted by mail at a later date. So we don't have to take a decision. This is more by way of information for the benefit of council members. So with that, I think unless there are any, I give the floor to Jian Wei of China.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, first of all, thank you, Tom, for hosting this assembly. And if I may ask a question on whether you or the chair could clarify whether we are going to have still continue to have a hybrid model of this meeting, because for my authority, they may have some difficulty by that time to have international travel. So it will be important for us to have that clarification.
Thank you so much. In terms of the assembly, it's still too early to provide you with a formal response to that. In terms of our next council meeting, we will do the proper consultation with everybody here in the next following weeks, due to the fact that we'll be in between COPs. Our next council meeting overlaps with COP 15. So we need to readjust the dates. And then we need to work on the modality that really fits the realities and the needs of the council members. So in terms of the assembly, this is something that we haven't got there yet in terms of the discussion and the organization. In terms of the next GEF council in December, we will be doing consultations and informing all council members on what are the options. This is the first in person, but also we got, I asked the other day to Nicolas, you said 150 people attended yesterday virtually. 150 people has attended virtually, which I welcome. And most probably the circumstances that we need to cope with in December are demanding. And somebody asked, I forgot about the cost of organizing this. I don't know if it was Gabriela or somebody else's. It goes in around $150,000 to $200,000 each council meeting. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to make the best out of this virtual reality. We will proposing that, but also we will assess the benefits of assess a balance within the content of the agenda and the benefits of having in-person vis-a-vis remote meeting. So a lot to decide, a lot to work, but thanks for your observation. We'll be informing everybody on the modalities that we'll be using. Definitely, there will be a lot of activities that will be organized for the assembly that will imply remote meetings and attendance. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Carlos. I give the floor to the representative of the CSO network. Thank you.
Well, we welcome Tom, that you are the one who received us and the assembly. That's a great thing for the CSO network. The importance of the assembly for the civil society community, because we have there, as you well know, a day per forum, and every instance there is to communicate just much better each time that we have that 4 years meeting, and just being participate and working very hard on that on the assemblies before. I really want to give all our support to Tom and to everyone for the year work that I mentioned. That it's not one day, it's not 6 months, it's just the whole year. Thank you very much.
I thank the CSO network for their vote of support to Tom and also to the government of Canada for that matter. I don't see anyone asking for the floor. So as I've said earlier, a decision on dates and venue will be adopted by mail at a later date. So that concludes our discussion of this particular agenda item. Our next agenda item is agenda item 14, and I'll hand it over to the chair.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Futuri. We still have two last agenda items for today. One is agenda item 14, other businesses, which I will be chairing. And then agenda item 06, report of the selection and review committee, which will be an executive session. And I will be giving the instructions on how that executive session will happen. This is a close conversation within the council members. So in terms of other business, yesterday when we were adopting the agenda, I received a request from Bosnia and the US that they wanted to address the floor. But if you allow me, before estimated friends from Bosnia and the US, I had a compromise with Switzerland, with Gabriela, with regards to your observation and recommendations when you were making your comments with regards to the staff sessions, where you recommended that the Secretariat should be working on a decision on risk tolerance and the risk appetite. And we will, I want to inform you, Gabriela, that we will do that in conjunction with the staff. We will be presenting a document that builds on what the staff presented here, a document that will be work with staff. And of course, I will encourage council members to join us in a small working group. And for that, I will be doing the proper communications via email, so we can work together with the staff and the input, as I said, of interested council members on a document on risk tolerance, risk acceptance, and risk assessment that will be presented in June 2023. Definitely, there is no real possibility for us to be working on something of this dimension and content for next December, but we will do it without any hesitation and problems in terms of what it means regarding the content, the demand for next June 2023. So we will proceed that way, Gabriela. Okay, thank you so much. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Bosnia, followed by the US. Thank you, Nan.
Thank you, Chair, very much for giving me opportunity to say something on behalf of Ukraine. Actually, we had a constituency meeting in 16th of June this year, and Ukraine requests that I address on behalf of Ukraine regarding environmental issues in the current situation in Ukraine. And so on that regard, my duty is that to read the statement prepared by the Ukrainian representatives. Respectable chairpersons, council members, and alternate representatives of conventions and agencies. First of all, we would like to thank the Global Environmental Facility for its long-lasting support to Ukraine. Just to remind, since 1991, it has been providing significant support to environmental sector reforms in Ukraine, demonstrating and piloting new environmental principles and methodologies in the field of biodiversity conservation, integrated water resource management, energy saving, nutrients and POPs reduction, climate change, etc. The application of these principles and methodologies become a ground for the development of a new national sound environmental policy compliant with main international environmental conventions and helped to build the capacities of the country to pave its way toward sustainable development despite economic difficulties. Also, let me thank GEF member countries for the hearted support of Ukraine in unjustified and unprovoked war of conquest from the Russian Federation. You have given shelter to our refugees, thus providing a sense of security. The support of you people in the information, military and humanitarian field on the streets and squares of your city inspires and empowers Ukrainians to continue defending itself and Europe at large against Russia's invasion. Thank you for supporting the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine. As you know, this war leads not only to deaths of thousands of soldiers, but also murder of innocent civilians, destruction of damage to buildings and infrastructure throughout Ukraine. The war has also a significant impact on the environment. This is a threat first to nuclear and chemical safety. We have cases of critically low missiles flying over nuclear power plant, and Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is currently under occupation and used as a military facility. At present, there are battles for Severodonetsk, Luhansk region, which houses the Azot plants, which was engaged in the production of ammonia. The plant is under fire, posing a significant threat to the environment, and there are a lot of similar cases all over Ukraine. Destroyed military equipment and ammunition, exploded missiles and air bombs pollute the soil and groundwater with chemicals and leads to land degradation. Thousands of mines and other explosives are left unmanaged in forests, lakes, rivers, and even at the Black Sea. There is an acute problem of municipal solid waste management after the destruction of buildings in cities that were released. Such wastes are also dangerous, and it contains hazardous waste, freon, mercury, lamps, etc. A number of the wastewater treatment systems in settlements are fully destroyed, leading to the discharge of untreated waters directly into rivers. Almost 3 million hectares of forest have been covered by the war. For comparison, this is almost the territory of Belgium. Due to Russian aggression, dolphins and other marine inhabitants are dying en masse. Roads of migratory birds are changing, and nesting sites of rare species are being destroyed. The nature is boundless and silent, so we need to speak loud for its needs. Overcoming all these challenges need a lot of efforts and time, as well as financial resources. which Ukraine unfortunately does not have. Besides, the environment is not a top priority of Ukraine's reconstruction plan due to the significant destruction and the need of rebuild settlements and infrastructure. It will be difficult for Ukraine and allocated budgetary resources for environmental protection in the coming years. So we are counting on the support of the GEF as the main environmental mechanism to help with green rebuilding. We kindly ask all the states to unite their efforts to help Ukraine and compensate for the negative environmental consequences of the military aggression of Russian Federation using GEF as a platform. Ukraine owns invaluable European ecosystem. It has habitats for many rare and endangered species, so its environmental well-being will affect the global biodiversity and sustainability of our planet. The GEF has developed very transparent and effective supporting mechanism for environmental conservation. Project implementation through honorable GEF agencies allowed to involve specialists from all over the world to create numerous opportunities for knowledge and experience exchange. From our side, we are ready to take all needed actions, including prioritization, required environmental activities and their urgency. In the military field, we have jointly created a historical precedent of courage and unity. Now we can create a new precedent of environmental solidarity beneficial for all living creatures on our planet. Dear Chair, let me, in addition to this statement, let me say a few words about the war and the environmental from my personal experience. I survived the war in genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina and co-authored a paper titled War and Ecology Case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which I presented at the International Conference in Beijing in 2004. Since then, I didn't think anyone would write and talk about the war and the environmental anymore, but I was wrong. I regret that this happened to Ukraine now. And I sincerely wish we all will start working as soon as possible to rehabilitate and remediate the degraded environmental there. Many thanks, and please help Ukraine in its green rebuilding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bosnia, the US, you got the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and thanks to our Bosnian colleague for making that statement. We have been asked to make a statement on behalf of Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Spain, Sweden, the UK, and the United States of America. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the unjustifiable, unprovoked, and illegal war against Ukraine by the Russian Federation. In addition to the tragic loss of life and suffering of the Ukrainian people, Russia's war has rendered catastrophic consequences on the environment and exacerbated global food insecurity. Our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine. We call once again on Russia to abide by its international obligations, immediately cease all hostilities in Ukraine, withdraw its troops, and facilitate the rapid, safe, and unhindered access of humanitarian assistance to those in need in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The US. China. Tianwei, you got the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We are in deep sympathy with the environmental and the human loss of Ukraine, and But with regard to the statement by our US colleague, we just think this statement is purely political, and this is not the appropriate platform to make such a statement on political issue. So we have a clear mandate, so this will not be helpful. Yeah, so we just hope our discussion will not be distracted by political issues, but just to focus on the environmental and global environmental benefits that related issues. So in this regard, we will call the Secretariat to hold steadfast to its rules and procedures and keep our discussion focused. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tianwei? I don't see any. Yes, India, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd make my intervention quite brief. We are not comfortable with the statement which has been just made recently for the following reasons. We feel that GEF is a forum to address challenging global issues, and it is inappropriate to use this forum to make statements of a political nature. Appropriate fora exist for articulating country positions on the situation in Ukraine, and our country, India, has already expressed its considered views on the same at such fora. Therefore, we see little merit. Second, we don't recall any past occasion where these platforms have been used to issue statements on conflict situations. Doing so now will set a wrong precedence and divert our attention from pressing issues of climate and environment for which we have gathered here. It is worth mentioning here that there was a proposal in the morning for issue of a joint statement in the CIS joint meeting of the CTF and the CF Trust Fund Committee, which did not find favor. Insofar as operations are concerned, we firmly believe that the GEF evaluates proposals and allocates resources on the strength of merits and in terms of its policies and guidelines. These policies and guidelines do not provide for distinctive treatment on the basis of whether countries are affected by conflict or not. As such, with these words, I hand the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I don't see any more requests by the floor. I thank the council members for the, yes. We got the floor asked by
Nicaragua.
Yes, Nicaragua.
Sí, como Nicaragua en capacidad nacional solicitamos un punto de orden para este tema y apoyamos la posición de China y también del colega que acaba de hablar porque creemos que no es un tema para abordar en esta mesa y bueno, y que quede en ayuda a memoria, ¿verdad? Nuestro punto de orden. Gracias.
Muchas gracias a Melissa de Nicaragua también. So with this, I will basically conclude this agenda item. I will ask my colleague, Sonja Teluxin from the GEF Secretariat to give some guidance with regards to some observation and questions that were presented, particularly yesterday with regards to information documents that we presented on ICP, CS, the budget. She will give us a little bit of guidance and context of what we are working on and what we will be doing from now to the next council meeting. Sonja.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for all the comments in the opening session on the CES and the SGP, which have been well noted and which we now return to under any other business as promised. So there were a lot of questions as to why these documents have been brought as information documents rather than decision documents. And So I'll start with the SGP. So the original intention of the SGP had been to bring it as a decision document, which is why the first set of lists of documents and agendas had included it. But we've been engaged quite intensively throughout the replenishment process, as you're all aware, on the new SGP and on the new modalities that are involved. And what we realized while working on the implementation arrangements paper quite intensively was that we needed more time to conduct the necessary consultations with UNDP and with the countries and the relevant stakeholders. We've had several conversations with the UNDP SGP, and they made that point to us, and it was well received, that we really do need to deepen the interactions we've had with them so far on the precise operational details. We also want to give some time for the long-term visioning process to take root. So you may remember from the IO evaluation about a year ago that was one of the recommendations. And again, there's meant to be a cross-fertilization between the long-term visioning process and the SGP strategy and the implementation arrangements. And the timings haven't worked out that way because of the intensities of both exercises, as well as coming in the context of the replenishment itself. So this is why the SGP paper, we brought an information paper to guide you as to what, the different parameters that we're working on and what progress has been made. But as we clearly state in the SGP paper, we are going to be bringing a decision document in December that reflects in full detail all of the critical parameters on which we know that you want to see and that you would like to discuss. So that is the situation with the SGP. So I hope that clarifies that. And if there are any further concerns, please let us know. There's a similarly on the CES, so the replenishment package and the allocation table allocates a fixed amount for the CES as it has done for the CSP in the past. Of course, now we have this broader strategy that's trying to bring under one umbrella all of the ways in which the GEF interacts with countries. So, we felt that, the division of that budget along the different lines, is more of an operational matter, and that we would be working on that within the Secretariat as we move forward fully into GEF 8 implementation starting next week. So this is why we felt that the CES paper as well was better as an information document rather than as a decision one, because the decision on the budget has already been taken in the context of the replenishment document itself and the financing table. And now, as we move into implementation, we will start categorizing accordingly into the different buckets as we see the needs of countries and as we interact with them in terms of the different requirements along the different lines of the strategy. So that was the reasoning for that. And again, if there are any further concerns or questions on that, we'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonja, for your clarifications. And before I end this agenda item, thanks to Gabriela's acute skills. She and this is Gabriela basically because I don't have William right next to me, rather than somewhere there in the ether. I was going to announce that the draft document on the summary of the chairs will be shared with all of you, but we haven't had any decision taken to the amendments done to the agenda items with regards to the lead agencies selections. The document was shared earlier today, and I would like to know if council members are ready to take a decision on the proposed text, so we can close that agenda item and we can work on what we have for the rest of the agendas with regards to what we have tomorrow. So are council members ready to have to take a decision on this agenda item? Good. Yes, China.
Thank you, Chair. Just could you clarify that in the final summary of this meeting, I think the draft you mentioned that you skip 2 issues, including this session. I just want to, I think we should just abandon the non-relevant part of our discussion, the political part of our discussion, and it should not be reflected in our summary.
Yes, thank you, China, for that. We will include the statements in what we call the highlights, which is not a decision of council. We record in every single council meeting all different interventions, and we will do what we normally do, which is called the highlights, which is not reflected in any way as a council decision. So that is what we normally do with a statement similar to this one. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry for coming back, but could you clarify the relevance of the our discussion or the statement to our mandate and our purpose of this meeting? Because I don't think they are relevant.
No, I won't discuss the relevance or not of the statements that were done by the council members. Council members are free to do whatever statement they can do. Our job is basically to take note of those statements. This is not coming in the summary of the church, and it's not related to any decision. Yeah, but the decisions will come, and what we call the summary of the church, we'll be presenting a summary draft tonight on what we have done yesterday and today, and it's basically responding directly to all decisions that were taken through all the different agenda items. Okay, thank you so much. So let me go back to the agenda item of selections of the agency. So I will just Argentina.
Muchas gracias, Carlos Manuel, por la palabra. Quería consultar, en primer lugar, agradecer a la Secretaría por las aclaraciones vinculadas al documento del CES. Me gustaría saber cuál es la diferencia que ocurrió en este periodo de tiempo, porque en otras ediciones siempre se requería una decisión del Consejo para aprovechar, para aprobar lo que era en su momento el CSP. Quiero saber si hubo alguna modificación desde el punto de vista del trustee o por qué en esta oportunidad este documento sigue siendo, o le van a dar en principio, por lo que entendí, un carácter informativo y no va a ser presentado al Consejo. Gracias.
Con muchísimo gusto y vale la pena la aclaración. Hay una decisión de el proceso del refinanciamiento del GEF, que vamos a tener una estrategia de abordaje estratégico con los países, que es un nuevo abordaje que el GEF hace con los países desde el punto de vista estratégico en la parte programática. El Country Support Program, que ha sido pues un programa corporativo por muchísimos años, se dedica principalmente a la parte de entrenar, crear capacidades en los procesos de inicio de los nuevos ciclos del GEF. El Country Support Program va a estar apoyado o va a estar dentro de un contexto de una estrategia en donde el GEF y los países generan esos diálogos políticos que nos dará mayor fortaleza política en la calidad y el contenido de los proyectos. La decisión de los donantes en el refinanciamiento es crear esa instancia y hay un mandato para nosotros en la Secretaría de hacer una propuesta en concreto de cómo se operacionaliza. Por lo tanto, no hemos cambiado en absoluto ninguna de las decisiones que salen del refinanciamiento del GEF, simplemente que vamos en ese proceso normal hacia un documento que formalmente será presentado al Consejo del GEF que contiene este nuevo abordaje estratégico con los países. En esta oportunidad, lo que hemos presentado es un documento de información que es un documento de avance del proceso del concepto y la conceptualización y la propuesta de operacionalización de eso, y el documento va a ser presentado en diciembre, y esto lo calculamos en razón del proceso de inicio del nuevo ciclo, el ciclo del GEF 8. Renato, pues ayer hizo una pregunta muy importante que nosotros también nos hemos hecho y que lo hemos de alguna manera abordado en principio, que es el presupuesto. ¿Cuál es el presupuesto de esta estrategia versus el presupuesto del programa de apoyo a los países? Y lo vemos de una manera integral. Es solo un presupuesto para poder hacer eso. Por lo tanto, el Country Support Program, el programa de apoyo a los países, es ese abordaje donde apoyamos en la parte de entrenamiento, de generación de capacidades de la Secretaría con los países al inicio del proceso del GEF, en el ciclo del GEF, y ahora este nuevo elemento es coger lo que llamamos los Country Dialogues, esos diálogos que dentro del Country Support Program antes existía, lo hacemos ahora de una manera más integral, con una visión más transversal de generar diálogos políticos para tener claridad, para que los países tengan claridad en la parte programática del nuevo ciclo del GEF. Entonces, aun y cuando tenemos una propuesta del Country Engagement Strategy, que eso no va a cambiar a lo que se había establecido o propuesto en el proceso del refinanciamiento, el Country Engagement Strategy es un esfuerzo en construcción. Se presentará, al igual que el programa de pequeñas donaciones, un documento para decisión del Consejo en diciembre, y que lo que estamos presentando es un documento de avance del esfuerzo para el conocimiento de los miembros de este Consejo. No hay ninguna decisión porque todavía no hemos llegado a poder determinar con precisión, porque tenemos un plan de trabajo y no hemos llegado al punto donde podemos presentarles con claridad meridiana esa propuesta. Esa propuesta vendrá, como lo explicaba Sonia, vendrá en diciembre. Cualquier requerimiento de información de detalle, estamos a las órdenes para brindárselos a todos ustedes.
Muchas gracias, Carlos Manuel, por las aclaraciones. Sobre el programa Pequeñas Donaciones, nosotros en su momento no levantamos también que había sido removido de la agenda, porque cuando leímos el documento aclaraba que eso en concreto iba a ser tratado en el 63 Consejo, ¿no? Ahora, no así figuraba en el documento sobre CES. Entonces, ustedes lo que están diciendo es que el documento va a seguir teniendo carácter informativo, el que presentarían en el 63 Consejo.
No, en el 63 Consejo vamos a traer un documento para decisión, tanto en el Country Engagement Strategy como el programa de pequeñas donaciones, en la próxima sesión del Consejo que va a ser en diciembre. Es un documento de decisión. Como lo explicaba Sonia ahora, el programa de pequeñas donaciones requiere de una serie de tareas, particularmente con el programa de Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo, el PNUD, que no ha podido desarrollarse por la complejidad de la tarea, y hemos considerado sano y recomendable el informar al Consejo del avance que tenemos, porque tenemos un avance sustantivo, y de ahí la razón de haber aportado el documento, pero nos falta una serie de interacciones, particularmente consultas a nivel de los Steering Committee de los países por la propuesta de gobernanza que tenemos. Además, tenemos que desarrollar tareas que tienen que ver con el mecanismo de microfinanciamiento, que tienen que ver con porque estamos haciendo un cambio muy importante en pequeñas donaciones, que es quitando, y es una recomendación que el AIO nos hizo, que es que quitáramos esa política de graduar países. Hay países, 16 países que están graduados y que no tienen una asignación del programa de pequeñas donaciones y tienen que aportar sus recursos STAR. Y nosotros consideramos que eso es un incentivo perverso para poder crecer en el programa de pequeñas donaciones. Por lo tanto, tenemos que ver cómo podemos crear un sistema para crear un incentivo para que los países sigan aportando de sus recursos STAR a pequeñas donaciones. Esa es una manera de hacer leverage. Y entonces, esos son los pequeños, grandes detalles que tenemos que definir y que no hemos logrado definir por la complejidad de la tarea y que nosotros hemos considerado que es importante informar al Consejo del avance del proceso con ese documento. Sí, y yo pido disculpas si pues creamos alguna confusión al haber inicialmente propuesto el documento para decisión, así entró en la primera agenda que pusimos y después cambiamos porque pues como les explicaba el proceso es muy complejo, pero sí los dos documentos vienen para decisión en diciembre definitivamente.
Perfecto, muchas gracias.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity to clarify and also to speak a little bit in Spanish in this session. I needed that. Thank you, Ana. I'm more eloquent in Spanish than in English, by the way. Okay, so let me go back to what I was proposing to the council members with regards to the decisions on the selection of the lead agencies. We shared a text early this morning. Everybody has the text. Seems like we're ready to have a decision. So I would like to invite council to take a decision on the text version that was shared with you all. I see no objections, no observation, no comments. We approve and like my co-chair does, decision taken. So thank you so much. With this, I'll pass it over to Nico, who will give us the instructions on how the rest of the session will happen. Nico, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So as mentioned previously, we will have the last session of the day, which is the report of the Selection and Review Committee. This is a session only for council members, alternates, and their advisors. So we're going to kindly request everybody else to leave the room as soon as possible so we don't delay this last session. Of course, we will request the technicians and interpreters to stay. And with that, thank you very much. And we will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you. You have to make sure that everyone else has left and that there is quorum.
Oh, okay, so, and
You
the
need-
quorum, and the quorum is
Quorum is 21.
21.
Yes.
No, but they listen more to your voice, so you just tell people to go out now, we want to start.
Okay, you want me to?
Please.
Cecile? This session is going to begin very, very soon. So we ask everybody else to leave the room, please. Only council members, alternates, and their advisors can stay. Thank you very much. This session will be starting very soon. Thank you. Please find your seats.